Please don't. I'm a terrible offering. You really don't want to do this. I taste terrible.
Not today.
What?
I laugh. I laugh just thinking about that. That's the issue.
I can never tell which laughs are coming from the recording and which laughs are coming live.
Me either. So, today it is Wednesday. It is another episode of the Mattriarchy. I am your host, Matt Reese, coming to you from unseasonably snowy Scottsbluff, Nebraska. We had this afternoon, a snowstorm blew in out of nowhere. It's crazy.
Wish I could get snow.
So, we have Fly Fox Pro in the chat. My screen's not going to let me do the thing there. There we go. And we have Abigail in the chat. And we have Dave Isanovich in the chat. And the actual topic, Fly Fox Pro, is we are discussing the personal politics of superheroes. Basically, I'm here to convince everybody that Batman wouldn't vote, and they're all here to disagree with me. That's basically.
You don't have to convince me. I already agree that Batman wouldn't vote.
Oh, I'm gonna change all your minds. But there's gonna be some asterisks involved. Because I think I see some of what your points are, and I think I agree to an extent, but I think there are some important exceptions. We'll get into that in a moment, so I don't want to bury the lead.
I will be the undecided voter in that.
Well, and it depends on which version of Batman. That's an important.
All right, well, we're just okay. We're gonna have to set the rules right now, which is we're dealing with the general mainstream understanding of these characters. We're not dealing with alternate timelines and that version from whatever.
But like Batman 66, which is a very mainstream rendition of Batman, definitely votes. I think I've actually watched him vote on an episode.
Okay.
So he votes.
Would classic Batman be anti-gun?
No.
Okay, we're getting into it. We have to goodness gracious. Stop breaking the format.
Here. Ooh. Fly Fox he's coming in hot with why is my touch screen not working? He's coming in hot. Superman is a moderate Republican, probably supports unions, but votes conservative on social issues. Ooh. Seriously, if you want on, just let me know and I'll shoot you the link. I'll DM you the link, Fly. Well, we could do that. We've got room. We had some people.
I think we should pop the link in chat. I think at a certain point, maybe we should actually pop the link in chat. And if someone wants to kind of hop on and kind of tell us how we're wrong, and this is actually how the superhero would vote, we should totally.
Yeah, that would be fun. We've got the room, so why not? Yeah, Dave's on the money right there. That's Adam West, 100%. Okay, so the first thing we have to do, we got to spend a little bit of time discussing a couple of ground rules and hashing out some debate about what is politics. And did anybody happen? I don't know if I have it. We had talked about grabbing a political compass, which of course is garbage and a lie, but it may be a useful visual aid if I happen to have one handy. I don't know.
Metal, grab us a political compass.
Yeah, I'll find one.
It'll take only because it'll take Reese 30 minutes.
It's very simple. You're either a Jedi, a Sith, or a Gray Jedi.
We just want a blank one, right?
Yeah.
Who invited Cartoonicus tonight? Okay.
No one. I feel like I got something.
This is gonna be a disaster.
Jim Tudor says, I vote for Batman. And Larry is here. Hey, Larry, how's it going?
Hey.
I was gonna say Batman actually does get votes every year, so it's fair.
But anyway, so the first thing to discuss is there's a ticket about what do we mean when we say something is political, right? And there's that cliche that's gets a lot of wind in the business. People say that the personal is political, and there's a debate about that. And people, say, keep your politics out of my pop culture and all that kind of stuff. And where do you guys think? Is any of that possible? Is that laudable? Where do you fall in the concept of public politics?
So of course, we were discussing this back in the back room before. Um, I was trying to point out that there might be a difference between what an individual person actually sees as a political issue and what they simply are going at from a standpoint of it's so obvious that they don't even think of it as a political issue. So that, for instance, if someone is I was saying, if Captain America is punching Hitler in the face on the front of your comic, is that because the artist is trying to make a political statement against the Germans, or is it simply that everybody around them hates the Germans at the time so much that he made for an easy and obvious bad guy, and that's what you need for your comic?
I don't think that makes a difference.
Or there was a wave of public propaganda, and the company wanted to ride that wave to getting the highest audience.
Well, I would say that still fits the first category. The question is, what is your actual intent when you go into this? Are you trying to get an idea across to people, or are you simply riding the waves? And someone else may very well look at that and they'll see a political angle from their point of view. Right, and I would say that happens all the time in comics. I think, especially nowadays, especially with like Marvel and the way so many of their writers tend to go. I think you could make the argument that a lot of people are not thinking like, "Oh, I need to go out of my way to stick such and such an issue in my comic." It's just so second nature to them that it automatically goes in.
So I do want to keep a couple of things clear. So the politics of comics itself, I feel like is, we're kind of doing this for the memes in a way. But I think the goal here is to kind of, pull up superheroes and make a best guess with textual, either evidence or just a general kind of feel for the character, like how they might vote on a particular, kind of like where they fall in the political compass, essentially. I think that when it comes to discussing the politics of comics, like most things in life, the personal is political, at least to an extent.
Right.
And people who feel like, oh, I get politics out of blank are still kind of taking a political position of a kind.
Yeah.
That being said, it is important to point out, because sometimes people use that as an excuse to basically shoehorn in political diatribes into storytelling that is obnoxious, that is detracts from storytelling, that does not serve storytelling, but merely serves as a soapbox for someone to essentially work out their own personal gripes with the world. And I don't want to defend that, because Kurt Busiek, before he kind of went a little loony, I think, but he initially had a really good take on this, where he said, you know what, I'm only really going to use, this is years ago, and he said, I'm only really going to use politics in my storytelling if it helps tell a good story, if it's an interesting thing to explore, if it makes sense for a particular character. I'm not just going to be like, hey, I have the megaphone now, so therefore all the characters at my disposal get to parrot my personal worldviews. That's just stupid.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that frustrates me personally so much about the whole dialogue. Right, when people say get politics out of my pop culture, right? It whistles entirely past the graveyard of what people mean by politics, right?
Well, I want to kind of jump on that point for a minute. So when we have Donald Trump painted over the top of MODOK, that's not really using politics. That's wearing the skin of politics to say, hey, everybody, aren't we relevant? Talking about politics in comics is like, hey, Civil War was actually an allegory about 9/11. That's politics in comics, and that's actually fine. I mean, Civil War wasn't fine. We discussed that point ad nauseum on here.
Conceptually fine. Right.
But conceptually, that was an appropriate use of politics.
In the same way that Watchmen uses Vietnam as a way to it's a political statement, but it's actually a tool to examine the inner lives of the characters that are involved in it.
Correct. And you say something about the state of what's the reptilian brain of the politics we have. That's fine. No one objects to that. When they say, oh, let's make the X-Men representative of gay stuff. That's the sort of thing that 10 years is going to be very dated and going to look very cringy.
Chat is popping off. We got to get through some of these. This is awesome. So Edwin popped in. Good to see you, Edwin. Hope
Yes,
you're doing
absolutely.
okay.
Hello.
Edwin's kind of jumping ahead of me because I was actually going to make this point in a minute. So I'm going to save it a little bit. But he basically says that Bruce Wayne would get really involved with local politics, which I agree with.
Yeah, that's where I think he'd be.
I think he would be very involved there.
Yeah.
Jim Tooner made said Tony Stark's a Republican, Wolverine is a communist. Bruce Banner is a socialist, and Dave said Hulk votes Green Party.
Yeah,
which is a Cartoonicus level joke.
I love it. I'm putting that in.
Well, I mean, he still uses punch cards, so.
Oh my gosh!
Terrible.
Is there anyone named Chad in any superhero universes?
No, stop them now. Stop them now, or we will not survive.
First of all, I would like to point out that as I know, Metal, that you are not a father, you are not permitted to tell that level of joke.
Level dad joke.
I'm going to stand on that. So anyway,
I did want to mention to chat as well, but sorry to interrupt. But we might pop the link in chat in a little bit. So if you feel very passionately about giving your opinion on, we're going to pop up some superheroes and then tell us what we think about where we think they fall politically. But if you go, you know what, these guys are idiots, they're wrong. I think we're going to give you guys, chat, an opportunity to come in and tell us this is how that superhero would be. I think that'd be a good way to engage with you guys.
Yeah. So, but before we get into that, there are two things that I want to. Actually, one big thing that I want to get back to. We were kind of talking a little bit ago. The discussion, and it's a pet peeve of mine when people say, "Get your politics out of my X," right? Or get politics out of X. We don't want anything to be cited. First of all, that's not possible. But the reason it's not is because politics, we in our modern parlance, we usually refer to politics as electoral politics or policy politics, right? But at the same time, we talk about classroom politics, we talk about workplace politics, we talk about dating politics, and we know about that because politics is your public life. It's the affairs of people in society, the way our inner life and our outer life intermingle with the inner and outer lives of other people. And because of that, every story has this element of you and society. And so when people say comics have always been political, the contrary, they're right, but that's not really what people are arguing about, right? People are arguing about the partisan nature and scaring away your fans or going cheap with stories. And so the Gramscians, right, they get to do a 3-card Monty and change the subject and inject their, partisan, bitter or lazy storytelling in place of real storytelling, under the guise of the broad definition of politics, by saying, well, Captain America punches Hitler,
superheroes have always been social justice.
Superheroes have always been public things. Yeah. Spider-Man's on the run from the cops, but he represents real justice and all this kind of stuff. And so when you have all of that in there, you actually in when people deny that politics is in comics in flat terms rather than using nuance or
nuance is important.
They hand over the argument to people who are going to use the broad definition of politics to slide in their narrow definition of politics. And that's one of the things that is so frustrating in the whole space on online political discussions, online comics discussions, is that people end up talking past themselves, and well-meaning folks who just want to enjoy story for story's sake and are willing to appreciate the political aspects as long as the story is solid, end up losing argument after argument because they're inarticulate in the way they address their points. And that bothers me.
You could go a step further too.
I mean,
and you could say that they've always been political because they decided to put their stories in cities. Because even if we go all the way back to where the word comes from and the people who gave us the idea of what politics is, they did not believe that people in the countryside had politics because small towns were basically just an extended family. It's once you got into a city, which the word polis comes from, is when things are political, the public life.
Very much.
I was going to say, you basically kind of just explained the entire problem with politics in general.
Yeah. 100%.
I have a personal. I'm with Reese a little bit. One of my personal pet peeves, although like I feel maybe a little differently on some aspects, but one of my personal pet peeves is people claiming superheroes very strongly and saying, "Well, superhero X is our guy." When in fact, I think in reality, we're going to dive into these. I'm going to join the meme
tonight.
I'm going to join the meme, but I will say that I think ultimately superheroes have a lot of nuance mixed in with them, and that it's hard to kind of say with full certainty that this superhero is X or Y, because in their publication, in the authors and people who created them and how they've evolved over time, they end up often being a mix, really.
Yeah.
There's nuance to this. There's a lot of nuance to this.
Well, and one really good example of that is Superman, right? Because Superman in his original iterations very much was the public persona of FDR, written by a couple of high schoolers who are just getting their news from the White House press.
Fireside, I think it was Siegel who said he generated Superman by listening to FDR's fireside chats.
Yeah, exactly. But that's not even who FDR really was. FDR was a massive crony. He was an absolute socialist. He robbed the people blind. He held on to power. He was craven. He was an evil son of a bitch and a total cuckold. But
ouch.
Yeah, he's a horrible person. And turning the Japanese was probably the least bad thing he ever did. He's a bad dude. I have no respect for Franklin Roosevelt. In fact, I dislike the man so much, I'm on standing orders in my family to not discuss him in mixed company.
Okay, we have to put a clock on it there. Okay, so we're gonna jump in.
I'm done with that. What I'm just saying is, like, so even when you're looking at the public persona of who Superman was, it still reflects a complexity of the time between how that shakes out. And
I'll give you an example of that. So Superman definitely had some leftist aspects to the creators themselves, I think leaned left. And so some of that showed up in some of early Superman, and this is a quote, I believe, from Siegel. And he said, the minute we came up with Superman, I showed it to Schuster, and the first thing Schuster did was come up with all of the ways that we could put Superman on get you t-shirts and merchandise. So the dream of Superman was a dream of not just capitalism, but big corporate capitalism from its inception. So there's a mixture here. So to simply slap a label that Superman's a super socialist and blah blah blah, and it's like, just shut up.
And once again, and the public person. I mean, you look at the first couple of Superman stories, and there's definitely those kind of lefty things, but they're also being done by a private individual as against the government who won't do those things.
I'd argue there's a lot of populism.
There's a lot of populism.
I'd argue
and Franklin, and that was the thing. The public perception was that FDR presented himself as a populist when he was absolutely an elitist. And so that's one of those things where you have suddenly it breaches the concept of what was really going on to present an idealized form that doesn't really fit cleanly with the politics even of the time. And looking at things where they are today, it's a whole different picture. And a lot of that's because we've been lied to about how politics functions. But
okay, well, it's 9:40. We gotta go. We gotta go. We gotta get some superheroes up.
We gotta move on. We gotta move on.
Who do we want to start with? I think since we've been batting it around,
we go all the way back and start with Superman.
Nah, we've been batting around Batman. We need to get him out of the way first.
Okay.
Chat's. We'll get to Superman. This is an important one. I did that on purpose for you.
Thank you.
Part of why Batman's on everyone's tongue is because that's the name of the stream. So those are guys who got notified. It says, "Does Batman vote?" or "Batman doesn't vote." Was actually the name of the show.
Well, there's some clickbait for you.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And yes, Edwin, the Fleischer Superman cartoons are still great, and they hold up really well to this day.
Oh yeah, they're absolutely brilliant. Those guys. Okay, so Batman. So who wants to start with Batman? Does Batman vote?
Who wants to take up the bat? Who's
it
bat first?
Thank you. There's at least two different Batmans because there's always going to be pre and post Miller, right? And so
Miller, sort of. Miller's Batman is very much, the pre-1950 Batman too, in a lot of ways.
I think we're gonna try and talk a
I feel like
generalized
there's
Batman
basically
here.
one version of Batman where Bruce Wayne would be out there at every second in some way or another trying to make the world a better place in more ways than just being Batman. And then there's a different version of Batman where Bruce Wayne doesn't actually exist. He died the night his parents did. Now there is only Batman, and the only way he's ever going to solve a problem is with his fists.
Well, first of all, I would agree that that is an interpretation, but it's not the primary interpretation. Even after Miller, you look at Batman under the direction of Denny O'Neil, and then he even in his Bruce Wayne persona, which doesn't show up all the time, but when he does, he's out there doing some sort of public good.
Okay, so I'm gonna interject here. I'm going to interject here just a little bit because this is going to become an hour-long discussion about who Batman is. So instead, I'm just going to say that what we should do is let the individual person who wants to say defend their position essentially come up with what version of Batman they're going to defend. That's going to lead to, I think, the best discussion here. So
Bruce Wayne would be a center-left, tough-on-crime Democrat. Because
right, give me why. I like it.
Because he runs a major corporation, so he benefits from state power connections. He also runs charities and social service organizations, which again also benefit directly from integration with state power. And obviously, he's Batman, so he's tough on crime.
Do we need to take into account the possibility of Gotham basically being New York?
No.
No. It's just Gotham City.
Yeah, right, it has its own thing.
Here's my take. My take is that Batman is going to be much more invested in local politics, as kind of Edwin mentioned, than bigger than that, unless it's Lex Luthor running for president, in which case I think we've seen in storylines that's when Batman sticks his nose into national politics. If Lex is running for president, Bruce will stick his nose in. Aside from that,
I agree with that.
He is heavily invested in local politics. I don't see why he has campaigned before for Harvey Dent. So, like, I would see that, like, if you're going to campaign for Harvey Dent, you would vote for Harvey Dent. So he's voting in local politics. The final thing I would say is that Batman, I think, is one of those sort of single-issue voters. And I was recently looking at an issue where he yelled at Simon Baz Green Lantern because Simon Baz dared to carry a gun openly in Gotham. And Batman, I would say that I do think that just due to Batman's not liking guns very much makes sense for his character. I don't think he would be particularly fond of. I think he'd be pretty strict on gun control within Gotham. I don't know if that means national, but I'm pretty sure that in Gotham City, he'd be pretty in favor of people not having guns open.
Also, the police unions are a gun control support organization. So that's also consistent with what would be in his character.
Yeah, him and Gordon would agree with that.
You guys are 100% wrong.
I think Batman
30% of what you say.
Wait. I think Batman is actually probably the only person in this whole list that we would put in this particular area, the enlightened centrist.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty big thing. But here's my thing is Batman has I believe at this point in his career entirely pulled away from politics in terms of voting. He doesn't take time to vote, doesn't think it matters because he's controlling special interests from behind the scenes. He's investing in charities. Charities are not invested in by the left. The only right wingers give money to charities. So that's
that's too much. No, that whoa.
Hold up.
You're the one who brought up nuance. Okay, you can't throw that out.
It's like 80 to 20. That's the percentage on it.
The kind of charities
Bill Gates donates like all of his fortune and then gets it back the next day. I'm pretty sure he's not on the right.
The kind of charities that Bruce Wayne donates to are like we're building a wing to the hospital.
Well, they're his own,
or we're building a drug rehab, or we're doing a program. Yeah, those aren't, the type of charities that you get a lot of right-wing donations to. Those are the kind of charities that partner up.
Is there a big difference between center left and center right at this point? Like, if he's just like, if he's gonna vote, I feel like he's.
I don't think he's gonna vote. But you didn't let me finish my points either.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, it's fair. It's fair. I'm trying to be controlled, but I don't think he bothers because I think like Edwin's talking about the powers behind the things are more important. and I definitely think that you're looking at something like that.
There's
But
no way
also-
he does. There's no way he doesn't vote in local elections.
Oh, I don't think he votes. I don't think he bothers. I don't think he knows what day it is some days.
No, he campaigned for Harvey Dent. You don't campaign if you
He
don't.
campaigned for Harvey Dent 30 years ago.
Doesn't matter if he
That was a
campaigns for Harvey
long
Dent. He's
time
going to
ago.
vote for
Yeah.
Harvey Dent. That means he did vote at least for.
Okay,
that
he
happens.
voted at least once 30 years ago.
And if
There
a
you
bill,
go.
if they were passing
the
a
other thing
bill
about
on,
it is
Okay,
he's
alright.
not anti-gun. Like
oh, you're gonna
that
all
was
right.
a-
You're
that's
that's
because
in
like
the comics.
in
That's
the
in
comics.
Okay.
In the comics, prior to the leaving of Denny O'Neil, for the entire stretch of time from 1985 up until later, he didn't use them, but he wasn't afraid of them, and he.
So
he-
again, there
in
are
fact,
two. At
all of
least
the
two
Robins were trained as sharpshooters, because you can't deal with a weapon you're afraid of. So he wouldn't.
No, there's okay. No. So I think that you're arguing a different point there. Being afraid of, or even being trained to use a gun, because there are military vets, right, who are like, they're only pro gun in the sense they're pro the right authority using it. So they're like, only cops can. I'm not defending this point, okay? So don't take me saying I'm defending this point. But I'm saying that there are characters, there are people that we know in real life who are very pro-police, very pro-military, and they're very strong on gun control. And to me, seeing how Batman's character emotionally reacts to things and so on, I'm like, I could see him being like, yes, military person. Yes, don't be afraid of it. But at the same time being like, in terms of how things are run in Gotham City, where I watched that street corner, my parents get killed. I'm like, if they're passing a handgun open carry ban, I'm like, I feel like Batman would vote for that. I feel like even if it was, even if he could, I could feel like even if he was split on the issue, his emotions would vote for that. And I'm like, and I could see him
Well, I think
doing
he'd
it.
be against open carry, but pro concealed carry, honestly. And that's even being like a tactician and the type of person he is. Open carry is pretty stupid.
But like,
also,
let's
the
say
other thing is
there's
that
a
gun is
non-corrupt
like-
judge running.
Yeah. So anyway,
I think Bruce would come out for a non-corrupt judge.
Yeah, well, yeah, okay, I'll give you that. But the other thing
Boy, is
about
that
like
true.
police, I don't think Batman's pro police unions, because the police unions continually foster the corruption through the Gotham system, and they haven't been able to beat it for the entire time he's been Batman. So I don't think that he would be pro police union either.
Well,
So-
you made
So
one
is
point.
he anti-union, or is he just anti-corruption in the union?
I mean,
It's
he's
like-
anti-corruption in the union, but you can't separate police unions from corruption. They exist to encourage corruption.
I know that's the way you see it, but how would
Right,
Batman,
Batman
see
see
it?
it.
How would Batman?
Well, I think that's just
see
how
it?
it's
The
been in
question-
Gotham
how would
How
specifically.
would Batman see it? He's only spent 20 years fighting a corrupt police union.
It's got a
Doesn't
point.
matter. You could still believe in something, and still superheroes are very good at this, as you well know.
You
They're
know, it
very
is-
good at fighting for things and understanding that dealing with
pretty
those
suspicious
paradoxes.
of any cop that
Well-
isn't working for him.
What
Yeah,
was the
at
slogan they
same
used for Harvey
time-
Dent's campaign in the movie? I believe in Harvey Dent.
Yeah.
I will admit though that how do I say it? Basically, if anyone knows how to obsess over something, it is Bruce.
Okay, I'll give you that.
So
My
some-
father. I mean,
right?
This is a good discussion, by the way. This is.
But
we
you
got
did
some good-
make
we got
a
some good pull
point
here.
earlier that started all this, though, that I think is important to take into account, and that is that Bruce. You didn't say this exactly, but it hit me. Bruce has, on many occasions, been portrayed to basically believe that he is Gotham. So
Mhm.
your idea of him feeling that like he can just solve all problems and the rest doesn't matter does actually strike me.
yeah, that's a fairly modern invention, but it's I mean modern as in like 10 years ago. So
See, I think
Okay, so Swamp Thing votes
ultimately,
Green Party.
he
We can
doesn't
solve-
care who gets
We can solve
voted
this one really easy.
in.
Yeah,
Swamp Thing's
right.
Green Party. He
Swamp
has to
Thing
be.
And
Swamp Thing
and
also
he could-
doesn't vote because he's dead.
Yeah, that's
well,
true.
no, that's
That
not
is
true. That's not true. He's registered in Chicago.
So he votes Democrat. Of course. How could I not see
Swamp
that?
Thing is in Chicago.
No, he's in
Oh,
Uh-huh.
he's making a joke about dead people voting and being registered to vote.
Oh.
Yeah, okay. curse you for making me explain the joke. All right, so I think let's try to wrap up Batman in the next like minute or two, because we got some other superheroes to bring up that I think are interesting. But this is a good debate. I think there's a case. The thing about Batman is I think you can make cases on different sides here, and that also brings the fact that when people try to say in a broad stroke swath, he's clearly this. I think that's the thing I push against the most, because it's like I think that you could make a case for him being in several different areas. How about let's try this? Let's try a negation. For just a couple minutes, what would Batman in pretty much any incarnation definitely not vote for? I think we might get close. We might agree more if we're like, well, clearly any
Drug
version
legalization.
Of Batman, it's not going to be. Yeah, it's not going to be a favor of like, let's encourage more crime.
Yep, that's true. That definitely not be in favor of drug legalization.
And he'd probably be very against all Zorro movies.
I'm thinking, what about prison reform? Because there are people who want to abolish prisons and abolish police departments, and I don't think Batman's in favor of any of that.
Well, he definitely wants to reform the asylum system.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
So he wants some prison reform.
What
He wants some prison reform.
Everybody goes to Arkham, no matter what they done or who they are.
No, they go to Blackgate. Some of them go. Some of them go.
Yeah,
to
some go to Blackgate.
Yeah, it's not always. It's not always.
Not since the New 52.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I think mental health problems have just risen in Gotham. That's why.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, since the new, I don't. At least not in any of the comics I've read. I've not seen them mention Blackgate at all. So
I blame Grant Morrison.
Well, yeah, sort of.
Yeah, so I definitely think that no matter what the version we have, Batman's pretty tough on crime. It's actually one of the things that puts him politically, when he's introduced to other superheroes who are different, it's one of the things that comes across is Batman's like, I am tough on crime. I'm not going to be like, oh, just let the criminal back in society. He is supposed to be
like a full paramilitary police force in one man, so that makes sense.
Yeah. So
But he's the kind of guy who will want a prisoner who's done his time, get out, get paroled to be able to, mainstream and live a normal life again. So he
does believe in rehab. That is true. He always wants Two-Face.
I don't know why.
First
time on the show, and I think you may have nailed down my personality.
Yes, you're 100% correct. That is exactly what's going to happen. Okay, so let's move on from Batman. Let's I think another good one to move on now. Let's do Iron Man next.
Ooh, I got to bring this up here.
Iron
Man is really good, but first I got to bring up this quote from Nick Mueller. He says, "Nick Fury doesn't vote; he rigs them."
That is correct.
That is true.
That is true.
Not every election, just the important ones.
I can agree with that. I would also say that Punisher, I think, according to Mike Barron, I believe Punisher is the kind of anarchist who does not vote. There's that famous panel. I don't pay taxes. I do not participate in the political system.
Isn't Frank a convicted felon anyway?
I don't think he's ever been no. I think maybe he was convicted back in the 80s.
So has Frank even gotten his franchise back?
When has that ever stopped anybody? I'm kidding.
It also depends where you live.
Well, it all depends on which municipality you live in.
All right.
So Iron Man. That's one that's tricky for me because Tony does work for the military-industrial complex, so that gives him certain natural inclinations towards the authoritarian right.
Can I jump in there for a second?
Sure.
I recently did a little study of this. The interesting thing about Iron Man is that it is canon. It is canon that Iron Man's political leanings have shifted over time. Politically started off as military-industrial complex, kind of war profiteer, or just very pro-military and selling weapons. And so he definitely leaned in that direction. And he was seen as very pro-state in that respect. And a bunch of people wrote letter campaigns, sock it to Shellhead, and they were like, we don't like this. And then Iron Man had storylines where he deliberately, distinctly addressed and essentially was confronted with what happened in Vietnam. And the story arc for Tony, whether we agree with it or not, Tony Stark basically became a sort of Silicon Valley pacifist. So I would say that he started off, I think, leaning pretty much in the sort of right kind of Republican. And but where he is now, canonically, is essentially a Silicon Valley Democrat.
I wanna say
That's
two
how I see it.
Violence for nobody but him, which
Guys,
is perfectly in that type.
I want to say two things here. One, I really don't want to talk about Civil War again tonight. I cannot do that. No,
Okay.
I will not. Two, I wanted to know what you think about this. I feel like I could be safe in saying this, but it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts. There are, characters who we've seen where it's just like some extreme author comes in and they totally flip a character entirely in order to get their own personal agenda in there, right? And it never makes any sense, and people yell and scream. Then there are characters who, whatever their situation will make a whole lot more sense if you talk about it. Would I be correct in saying that perhaps no superhero is used more to kind of represent and fulfill ideas without feeling like it's the absolute extremist, makes no sense kind of thing than Tony Stark? I hope I'm play there.
I kind of lost your point there.
I feel like if you don't count times when an activist just goes ham crazy and does something that makes no sense for a character, I feel like Tony Stark probably has the most amount of people actually using him to represent certain political ideas.
Tony was used more politically than Captain America was during Vietnam early on. He represented I am the anti-commie basher, and he fought communism harder than Cap did. But like I said, post Vietnam, they took the character, and some people will interpret this differently. Some historians will say he was rehabilitated, and other people are like, no, he's lost something. Either way, he had storylines where he directly basically said, "This is who I was. I am no longer that man." So the man that he was, which was very he was very anti-commie basher, and very pro-Vietnam War, at the very least. So came out as completely anti-war and committed to a sort of like pacifist technocrat. And over time, he basically became a Silicon Valley technocrat. So you can definitely see a transition of the character, I think, leaning more right, especially in terms of it being against communism. And then now where he's at, I think he's definitely this sort of like techno-socialist he's like Bill Gates,
I do want to address a comment from the chat that I've got up there from Captain Cummings.
Sure.
Military Complex is right. What party got us into Korea, Vietnam, and Syria? That's an excellent point. The one counterpoint to that is that the firm establishment of political philosophy in terms of armament, going back to Teddy Roosevelt, speak softly and carry a big stick. War is something to be do. Peace is our job. War is just something we do for kicks. The chief of the Strategic Air Command said in the 80s, the idea that America would hire someone like Tony Stark to have the capacity for war is a right idea. The idea that you would use those in prolonged, ineffective, decade-long military conflict is definitely not. So that would be the thing. But a lot of people don't think about it in those terms. But there you have it. That would be.
I should also warn us all against the ideas of ever actually focusing on party as opposed to issue here, because parties change all the time, and half of them are corrupt and don't actually mean what they say anyway.
A lot of parties are definitely corrupt. That's the issue. So, and one of the things we didn't really get into is discussing the nature of the political framework, right? Because that's one of the big debates on the whole perspective, and one of the reasons I reject the political compass as a framework, because the left-leaning libertarians don't actually exist, because in order for the objects of the left to work, it requires government force. So there are people that believe that they don't believe in government force, but the minute something goes against their worldview, well, they use any sort of government power, whether it's formal or informal governments, to crush you. And
I
because
said
there's
I didn't want to
only-
talk about Civil War.
Look,
Fly
look.
Fox
Great Awakening.
Fly Fox is bringing up some interesting points. He thinks Tony would go on Joe Rogan, and that he'd be like Elon Musk, not conservative in the traditional sense, but the Dems having moved to the crazy extreme away from him. That's an interesting point. I definitely think
I could buy that.
Go ahead.
That feels
I
like
could
a
buy
very
that.
Tony thing. Yeah.
I think Tony is always on. Tony has demonstrated a willingness, whether it is in his initial commie bashing, Vietnam War supporting self, to armor wars, to Civil War, to all the stuff afterwards. Tony has definitely always been the type of guy who uses his power and uses the power of the military-industrial complex, his connections with corporations and the state, to do what he thinks is best for the country. So he's definitely a statist, I think.
Yeah, well, I was
using
going to say,
power
I
for
think
what he
he's
thinks should be done.
halfway up that authoritarian line, but he's pretty close to the center. I think the problem is it's been such a long timeline that also politics have moved around him too, and that's changed a lot of different things.
And let's not forget, Tony was part of the actual deep state in the MC, in the Marvel Comics setting.
Intelligentsia, yeah, okay. So, like I said, he is part of the power framework. He's not. He's always been that. And he, like I said, Armor Wars. If you're a big fan of civil liberties, like my hackles got up reading Armor Wars, because Iron Man was like, "Nah, your civil liberties don't mean squat, because I'm just going to
you stole from me. I'm going to steal it back.
We're gonna trop right all over you. I doesn't care what laws I have to break." So, but it makes Tony an interesting character. I'll give you that.
Well,
and I think one of the things that Tony has for him, generally speaking, although not in Civil War per se, but generally speaking, across is his altruism is greater than his political affiliation. So, very seldom is he actually. I mean, even when he was, the commie basher Tony, he still was doing this because he believed it was 100% right.
Yeah.
That
He's somewhat of a
even his
bleeding
profit
heart.
motive is justified, because it's not bad to make money, because thousands of people work for me, so I need to make sure they're feeding their family too. So,
and I was going to say that this is one interesting thing about Tony, and I know that his origin story, I'm sure, is probably not, the original origin story is probably not the same as whatever we can consider his origin story to be now, but within that modern version, we see a character who, like you said, it's actually canon that he had one idea, then he changed it. And it usually tends to come with a major, emotional upset in his life. So he is the kind of guy who can be faced with something and realize, or at least decide, that he was wrong and choose to go another direction.
mm-hmm.
I agree.
Unlike Green Arrow.
I agree. The one thing I will say, let's move on. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so Green Arrow.
I knew we were going to get here.
Denny O'Neil essentially cemented forever that Green Arrow is basically a socialist.
Right.
So
at what point do I get to bring up one of the most famous comic pages in history?
Now.
Okay.
Yeah, so that we're talking about Green Arrow now. Larry, what I mean, I feel like we're all going to agree on
Green Arrow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm Green Arrow being a democratic socialist is pretty standard because of Danny O'Neil.
Yeah, that's
he's a champagne socialist.
Yes, 100%. And the crazy thing is, even when he gives away all of his fortune and and dissolves his company and sends thousands of people to the bread lines, he's still an elitist, a horrible, smug elitist, slumming it with his girlfriend's flower shop. What a piece of crap!
Not a Green Arrow fan, I see.
Well, I actually really love he's smarmy and he's funny, and I love archery.
Yeah.
I've been a huge fan of that. So I like Green Arrow comics, but when you spell it out, it's just like.
He's an entertaining guy. He's just a horrible person.
He's just a horrible person.
His kid was a better person than he was. Unfortunately, not as good as Green Arrow.
On that note, he's kind of like Batman, though, right? He's a horrible person who really wants to be a good person. He's
Yeah, that's
trying
true.
to. He's just not good at it.
No,
He's really
Batman's
bad
not,
at being any good.
Batman's a better person.
Yes.
It also depends which
You-
Batman again. Like
you
when
got-
he's
yeah,
run,
you gotta
but Batman
understand
used
that,
to be
like-
a really, really good person.
Yeah,
This
that's
sort of
true.
like tortured Batman who's just a psycho. Like that's not the.
Well, and even like
There are plenty of much more well-adjusted versions of Batman that aren't
Tom
just
King's
like
Batman. I mean,
a
you know,
psych ward
Yeah,
version.
like the
Oh.
Batman who hates rock and roll.
yeah, you know, you Batman,
Oh.
you know, in the classic years. I mean, not the only ones, but I mean, you get Doug Monk, Chuck Dixon, Alan Grant, those guys. And there's another names I'm skipping them right now, but in that period of time that we're writing Batman on the regular from 85 to 2001. I mean, they really got that idea of somebody who's he's suffering from this trauma, but he doesn't let it hold him back. He's not out for revenge. He's out to keep somebody else from suffering. This quixotic quest, but the nobility and all of that. I mean, that's Batman I cut my teeth on. I know it. I'm like, even going back to, and I'm going to forget Mike Barr's stuff in the early 80s and the late 70s. That just there's this darkness and this gothic aspect to it all, no pun intended. But there's still this hope and this thing to it. Sorry,
guys, we're going back to.
I know.
Let's get some. Let's. I think we need to revisit a character that I think actually will spark some more debate, because the Batman debate we had was really good. That was some good stuff. So I think the chat liked that, and I think the chat's going to enjoy the next two characters we should take a look at. So let's do.
Before we get onto that, I did want to point out the amazing pun from a genuine certified dad in the chat there.
I've never read a Green Arrow comic in my life, so I bow out of this one. Yeah. I need a go. Somebody needs to get a gong. So I think the next two we should do.
Who wrote the Anarchy character? That was Alan Grant, who in his 30s was considered himself to be anarchist.
It had a great tagline. His name is his goal.
Yeah, it was. It was great, and I actually really enjoyed him as a foil to Batman. His solo adventures weren't quite sharp enough, probably because Anarchy itself doesn't work. But that's a different story.
Let's do. I think we should do two. So we should do Superman and Captain America. I think we're gonna have some real good debate on these two. Let's do Superman first, and then do Captain America second. But I think these are two characters that we can really have some fun with. Superman. And there have been some writers who deliberately try. There was one, I forget who it was, but actually tried to pin down who Superman would vote for. But tossing that aside,
we didn't even talk about the worst panel ever.
Oh God. Here we go.
Great panels.
Okay.
But it was always fascinating that they did this. Actually, really interesting concept of putting these two together, because basically Green Lantern is basically Superman. Green Arrow is basically Batman. And so they were able to put these two together as total opposites, and they just happen to also be total opposite in terms of politics. So, not that I necessarily agreed on all
this. This is actually not the worst part of this story.
Kind of a cool thing that, how they were able to put all this together.
The worst part of this setup isn't this. This is the famous sequence,
right?
But the part that my brain breaks at, and then we should move on. But after the part my brain utterly breaks at is the fact that a Guardian, one of the Smurfs, the Guardians who basically represent the concept of justice. And one of them basically comes down and says, you know what? I'm completely out of touch. And I need to go to this primitive planet and go on a road trip in the back of a truck. And I need to understand how racism works in America. Because I don't understand how justice works. And it's like, oh my gosh. I could understand Green Lantern and Green Arrow doing that road trip. But the idea that you had to take a demigod of a representation of justice as a demigod, and you have to lecture him too. And I'm like, shut the hell up, Denny.
Don't forget that Superman himself did that.
That was very hard. Everywhere. That was very hard for me to process.
Yeah.
So
I gotta say one thing. Jim, I'd love to hear justification on this point. We can't go into it, but I gutturally want to disagree with you.
But what? Tim was raised by a rich, wealthy guy.
Yeah.
Lots of people who are Bernie Bros were raised by rich, wealthy guys.
Yeah, but he was.
That doesn't mean that
Tim was. It's a whole thing. We don't want to get into that right now.
All right,
so let's go to Superman.
Larry,
let's
do Superman first. Superman, what do you think politically? Superman, what are your thoughts?
I think Superman and Captain America both started more towards the left and drifted towards the center since they became symbols of homogeneity. So they're both peak centrist energy.
Okay.
My problem here with Superman is that he's probably the only character on this list who has more variations of him than Batman.
And my perspective on this is I want to kind of take away the variations and think within the fiction, where should Superman's political compass be? He wants to be the most apolitical because his power set is so great. His service and duty is to the world. If Superman says, screw this politics, it could upset the world order, cause wars and stuff like that. And that's not what Superman's about.
Well, okay, so there's a little bit of that, but he does, in many versions, you got truth, justice in the American way, and that implies something.
I mean, yeah.
What I really can't stand about modern Superman is how they're always telling us, you need to be their hero, you need to be the thing they look up to and gain hope out of. It's like you are the most important thing to the entire universe here. No one is capable of doing it themselves, and it's just got this fascist attitude that I feel comes off it.
Superman definitely has some concern. I feel like with Superman, it's very important to discuss him in terms of broader values. I definitely think there's a lot of conservatism in Superman. He definitely acts to conserve society. He does not act to reform or revolutionize society. In fact, many stories that have been written about alternate Supermans, like Miracle Man by Alan Moore, or any other story that Alan Moore writes, it's essentially taking the idea of Superman and making him into a revolutionary figure. The version of Superman we all know and love is more on a conservative side. Even leftists acknowledge this, and when they try to critique him and say that he is, when they try to complain that Superman is fascist in some way, they basically try to tie that into like, well, he represents conservative values.
For him. I'm not even going to call it directly on the compass. I think he is a just past center right libertarian. I'm going to say 3 points down, like 5 points right.
I actually really agree with the medals thing, and largely because of what Fly Fox points in the chat. Superman is a Midwest moderate Republican. Small town values remain despite having moved to the big city. And because one of the things you're looking at here is even in those original stories when he was, very much this FDR kind of guy, the image FDR was projecting was this old time America, right? And what are those American values? Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, those sorts of things. Superman is about preserving that, manifesting that in ways. It's the whole American dream idea. That's what these two immigrants, sons of immigrants that came up with this idea about that American, that the dream is possible. And in our current political climate, only one side of the equation believes that the dream is possible. The other side says we need a whole new dream for a whole new generation because the old dream was racist.
Problem is, how many times have you seen one of these like possible futures or alternate futures where Superman basically took over the world and created a perfect crimeless utopia?
Yeah, but that's not Superman.
Yeah,
that's not Superman.
Saying it's him in the future. I mean, it's
that's like
a what if.
To address that comment, look at Captain Cummings' comment there that I posted there.
I just feel like it's the problem of anybody and everybody being able to use Superman to justify whatever point they want to say, because he is the big blue Boy Scout. He's never supposed to be wrong about anything. One thing I very much dislike about him, mind you.
Right. But even the fact he's not supposed to be wrong about anything is because that he represents something. And this is the thing about the idea that when people tell Superman the world needs to look at you, right, that's weird. But when Superman is the kind of guy like he was when in John Byrne was writing him or Dan Jurgens is writing him, he's somebody that people just look to because he is that guy. That's different. Mm-hmm. That's a different kind of nature of a character.
That's my point.
I have to defend the honor of my boy Superman now. It's
funny. So hilarious to hear you say that, by the way. I hope you know that.
It's a character arc. It's
Superman's
because the world turned so insane and started to hate what Superman was. I had to turn into a staunch defender of him. So the point I want to make here, though, is this, and I think this is an interesting point. I'm interested to hear what the panel has to say. I think Superman does have some conservative values. I don't know exactly where I'd pin him there, but I would say this. I believe that Superman votes because it's part of civic duty and is a very civic character.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
I'm going to put a big asterisk here.
Probably
I
going to say the
believe
same
that-
thing I was about to say.
I believe that Superman is the type of voter who constantly does what we call throw your vote away, in the sense that he picks an idealist, because he's an idealistic character. Okay, so he basically finds the one candidate, and he will not publicly endorse because he doesn't want to sway it. He wants the world to kind of make its own way. But I believe that Superman's the type of person who basically finds a candidate who represents the best of American values, and it's the type of candidate that never gets elected. Superman never votes for...
I will mostly agree. I've got a caveat on that.
Okay, sure. Let me finish this.
I gotta say, so you're telling us right here, everybody, pay attention. This is new canon that Twitless is defining here. Superman voted for Ross Perot. It's
what I'm saying is
we have got Bill Clinton.
I'm not even saying Ross Perot. I'm saying that like Superman wrote in this local guy who ran for office and didn't even get like approved to like he didn't have the funding to get like into all 50
Bibbo
states.
Babowski every time.
He writes in this local guy who represents the best of America, and so he votes for who he thinks would be the best person to lead the country, and it's the person who would never win. And so in a sense, Superman, in my opinion, would be the kind of guy who always throws away his vote, but he votes on principle. And I know people like this. I know people like this who say, you know what, this is the person who matches my principle. I vote for him for president. I don't care if he never will win. I vote by principle.
Like
that is that's who Superman is to me. What do you guys think?
I can buy that.
Okay, my caveat. Not everything, not every type of election or ticket allows you to write in. And I believe civic duty that he will vote in every single ticket. So I believe that if he doesn't see a write-in or somebody that he feels conscionable to back, that he will skip that thing. Like he'll still go to the ticket, he'll go down the whole thing, but he'll leave blanks on things that he just doesn't feel that his conscience will let him vote for it.
I agree.
Yeah.
So he definitely.
But if he writes in a guy who'll never win, that's why he doesn't talk to Lois about why he votes, because Lois would make absolute fun of him.
I'm telling you, like Superman, like said, he there's this guy, and Superman and 10 other people voted for him, and that's Superman found like the best, person to lead the country, and then he doesn't tell anybody about who he endorsed.
Just about the most perfect.
Probably voted for his dad as a writing half the time.
But it's Fly Fox Pro does bring up an interesting point. As Clark Kent, he would know these politicians. So as Clark Kent, he might report on somebody who could locally make waves. I think. I don't know if he tried to sway a national election. I don't.
Yeah, his editor would be the one. Like the newspapers usually endorse somebody, so he would just leave it to the Planet to decide who they're endorsing.
And also, didn't Clark normally write crime beat stories? Typically.
I think it depends on which era it happened in, because
he
was during part of the Jurgens run in the late 80s and 90s. He was the tech beat writer.
I mean, that's the thing right there. How in the world does Clark manage to successfully work for the news media and stay nonpartisan?
Well, because he's Superman.
Exactly.
How does he keep his job?
No, he was raised better. That's the real thing.
How does he keep his job?
Not everyone, and okay, so I'm not going to defend the media here, but not everyone in the media is a corrupt pinko. It's just like
just 80% of them.
Yeah, just 80% of them.
80,
so look,
96.
you don't need to be politically charged to be corrupt in the media. You just have to
By the way,
understand
guys,
how news media works as a business.
By the way, guys, how dare you make Twitless have to defend the news media?
Thank you for making.
Well, I think he keeps his job the same way Spider-Man keeps his job as a photographer. He can bring them stories that like nobody else can seem to bring them, right?
Yeah.
Because he's always in the right place at the
Does
right time.
he
He's got a
actually
perspective
do
they
some
can't
comics, though?
afford to get rid of.
Well, see, and here's
I feel like
here-
it's always
I think
Lois doing that.
I think Fly Fox Pro has answered your question perfectly.
It's a comic.
It's a comic.
1930s, right? Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
here's the interesting bit. Captain America, I believe, it votes the same way as Superman does.
Mhm.
Now I could
Yeah,
be
I
could
could
be
agree with
wrong, but because I will say this, Captain America has had moments. Maybe I need to qualify this because Captain America had the Nomad moment, right? So he did have moments of disillusionment. I don't think Superman has had those as much politically, except when Luthor is president. But that's another ball of wax. But I think that Captain America largely is the type of person who's like, I don't want to over-influence the politics of my country. I want it to make its own decisions. I find that one candidate who will never win, who represents the best of America, and I write him in if I have to, kind of a guy.
I do believe.
I think he's
that,
even more libertarian than Superman is. I would put him
Well,
even slightly further down.
well, and I think it depends on which era he is, because I mean,
Well-
part of the thing is because he's been so long lived, he's
Right.
been through some stuff. So like Steve Rogers in 1938, right? His first election right out of high school, he voted straight ticket Democrat. I guarantee you, he was FDR's boy 100% of the way, and would have backed the party line all the way up until he froze, right? But when he comes out, stuff's different, and so he's gonna have to realign his political opinions because so much stuff has
So,
happened on that. And
there's-
I think that if you, I mean, in a lot of his Finding America stories, he always gravitates toward common people, toward everyday people, toward getting back to the farmers and the mechanics and the people at the Waffle Houses. So I think that depending on where he's in, I think his voting habits are going to line up with what's going to be the cabbies, what's going to help out the cabbies, and what's going to help out the hairdressers and your average normal folks the most
I
at that
think I
moment.
just
It's definitely
realized-
not going to be whatever Ta-Nehisi Coates cooks up.
Yeah, for sure.
There is, I just realized there's a problem with this character too, in terms of being multiple versions, because you got to deal with the version of Captain America who went all the way through, from 1940s World War II through Vietnam, and then was frozen for like a couple of years,
No, that's not how
and
it
the
works.
modern version where he was frozen right there in World War II, and then waited 80 years and woke up in like the 80s.
Okay, so that didn't happen.
Retcon, baby.
Not just because of retcons, but because they stopped producing Captain America stories in the early 50s and then didn't pick them up again until the mid 60s.
Yeah, it was 60s. Yeah.
So, and when they picked him up again, he had been frozen since the World War II.
Oh,
So-
I never realized that.
When they reintroduced him into the Marvel universe proper,
That was when they reinvented it.
That's
I
when
did
they
not know
retconned
that.
it.
I thought there
And
was
so-
a more modern
and so
version.
No.
they
no.
explained the
Oh,
50s
okay.
appearances with
Now,
two
Rob
subsequent Captain Americas.
I think what Cartoonix might be mentioning is that Rob Liefeld did one. I think where there was a
No. I simply thought that
okay.
his
never mind.
original freezing actually came from where he
No,
was.
you're confusing the MCU there
Yeah.
a bit.
No. I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying I thought that when he was originally frozen, it was back when we last saw him, and only recently did we reinvent him to have been frozen back in 1945. So
They stopped publishing him. Reese is right. They stopped publishing him. They brought him back 50s.
And then they said, "Oh yeah, here's some other Captain Americas who totally existed for reals, you guys."
oh, that's
Yeah.
right.
Well,
Original
and
Captain America was a
America-
golden age. That's an important thing. Marvel is largely a Silver Age creation, but
Mhm.
Cap is a Golden Age character.
Right.
and the Marvel universe really was only impact in the Golden Age in two characters, right? Cap was existent, but he didn't really interact with anybody outside of his book. Namor and the original Human Torch are the only characters that cross over outside of covers within actual stories. And so so when they created the Marvel universe after Stan Lee and Kirby introduced Fantastic Four and Ditko with Spider-Man and the whole thing, that's when they started saying, okay, well, let's bring in some of these ideas that we worked on when we were kids, because a lot of those guys worked for Martin Goodman. Goodman was still at the company, but he wasn't running the day-to-day at that point. And brought in these other things. So yeah.
All right.
All right,
So let's use
Phil
that.
is starting a fight with me here. He says
Huh?
the early Mr. A comics suck. And I'm like, those them's fighting words.
Well, I haven't read any Mr. A, so I can't even step my foot in there.
Ditko's great. No, let's move on. Did anyone on the panel have a hero that they wanted to discuss? I actually wanted to maybe turn to chat. Chat, do you have a superhero you want us to argue about in terms of where they'd be politically? And maybe this would be a good time to pop that link in chat. Maybe allow some of chat to jump in if they want. And tell us either we're wrong or introduce a character that they want to have that they want to introduce to us and say this is what they think.
Quick question. Before we do that,
yeah,
are we not obligated to bring up Wonder Woman?
Sure.
Wonder Woman can't vote.
Wonder Woman can't vote.
She's a foreign diplomat.
Wait, what? What?
Yeah,
Wonder Woman's a feminist.
Like you said,
from
politics
feminist
is always
land.
about.
So
Wonder Woman is a monarchist. She only believes in violent ways of ending things according to bloodline feuds.
Oh my gosh, the original version is the
Yeah.
opposite of that.
Right.
She is a kinky pacifist and it is literally a
Kink by definition is violent. I don't know
a carbon print of just like feminism stamped into comic books.
All
Right,
of
and that's
Lisa
the
is
thing.
violence.
That's why I knew we had to bring her up, because one way or another, this is a character who was born into politics from the moment she existed.
That is correct.
Well, no. If we're gonna do
Even
something like
Democratic
that, let's
Athens was violence.
Let's talk about Carol Danvers, who started out as Miss 70s feminism and is now a representation of violent militarism.
But she's
Well,
also
isn't it modern feminism?
right.
Okay, let's
that's-
one at
Yeah.
a time. One at a time. Wonder
That's the
Woman
thing.
first. What does the panel think? And then we can move on to.
What if we do? Who
Sorry.
would win an election?
I mean, I agree with Reese. Wonder Woman's a monarchist. She is a princess from a monarchy, and she's their ambassador.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
And
I
it's
go with
a-
that, but you do have
It's
to
a
add.
it's a tribal monarchy. They train in combat, even if it's not their first move. If somebody
a-
disagrees with them, it's violence.
You still have to mention that it's a matriarchy, and it is in its original intention, it was meant to be.
It's
Dude,
basically a
Okay,
commune.
first of
A
all,
pacifist-
I got to point out that the matriarchy does not mean it's not violent.
I didn't say that. I wasn't arguing with that. I was just saying that if we're going to talk about Wonder Woman's politics, we have to bring up the fact that it is a gendered politics. It's not just a gender neutral one. It is a womanist, a feminist position. And
Womanist
it
is probably more accurate.
and is a position, and it's meant to be. And this is something that I will say that I'm going to push back a little bit. It's meant to be heavily pacifist.
That's because she's a commie.
But they
I'm
use
just
mind
gonna stay on
control
their own little
for it.
island. And
I'm
it's
just saying.
Everything they do is violence.
right, but they stay on their own little island. Right?
Their
They're
interpretation
only
of
interested in doing
their
anything
interpretation of
that affects
pacifism.
them.
I'm not. We can
And-
debate
and-
that, but it is
well,
their,
And one of their therapies for fixing the minds of broken women is spanking. Everything they do on that island is violent.
pacifism. It's pacifism through
Okay.
kink.
That sounds
Which-
like one of
which you
those
can-
old 1940s versions.
You can argue it all day long. It is pacifism through kink. That is her position. So like her initial position. Like that's just what it is. We can
I don't want to
debate-
talk about Wonder Woman's position, okay?
This
Let's
may
go
have been
on.
a mistake.
No, I to a degree agree with Twitless. She views women as a class. She comes from a commune of women that is matriarchally led because they just agreed to allow this. She is easily a feminist communist.
Except that she believes in the divine right to rule.
It's just that Reese is
Yeah,
going to hate me
it-
saying this. It's just that Wonder Woman comes from the one place on Earth where communism worked.
Well, no, it's not actually communism. It's not actually communism because the size
Right,
of their
there is a
society.
monarchy.
It's a tribal monarchy. So
It is a commune. It's just not.
It is a
communism.
commune, though.
yeah, I mean, that's when you get to tribal sized governments, the idea of collectively holding goods that the monarch holds goods for the people. The monarch still controls them, and control is ownership, and so the monarch owns the stuff.
Yeah,
It's-
it's
it's-
Lord and vassal.
The English term is commonwealth, the wealth of the commons.
So
There you
I'm
go.
going to push back a little bit on the monarchy angle because it's definitely there, but I feel like it's the type of situation where it's like everyone is equal. It's just that the monarchy are more equal than others, essentially.
Okay,
That's
okay.
even more favor for communism.
I'm just saying. I'm
Wait,
just saying because the
Thanks,
whole
Orwell. We've
the
got
whole
it.
idea- the whole idea is that it's less, I think, vassal and more
So-
like the
So,
Here's the
Twitless, are
weird
you saying
thing.
this is feminist
here's
North
the weird-
Korea? Because that's what
Imagine
it
yourself-
sounds like you're saying. You're saying this is feminist North Korea.
Yes.
I
That's pretty good. That's pretty close. So, but imagine yourself, you're a woman. Okay, you got your double X chromosomes, you're sitting there in Paradise Island, you decide Queen Hippolyta's doing a crap job. It's time for a new chicken on this hen house. Oh, what do you think happens?
War.
War.
no. Okay, whoa,
I
no.
mean,
Yeah,
no,
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 either-
Hippolyta-
Well, obviously they
Queen
wrestle
Hippolyta-
for it.
Hold up, hold
Yeah,
up,
that's
hold up.
wrestling
In
is
blood and oil.
That's actually the true part. No, but I was going to say is the fact that the whole pitch, whether you agree with it or not, the whole pitch is that Paradise Island is in fact a paradise. They don't have the problems that man's world has. That's canon. You know, you can agree with it or disagree with it all you want. The canon of Paradise Island is the fact that the commune has like no problems.
because they spank women until they agree with them.
Oh, here's
That
You are
sounds a lot easier than it
You are
is.
being reductive and you know it. Okay.
here's the weird thing
You're right.
about
They
though
also
this actually.
use the mind ray, and they also use bondage gear and keep people from walking or feeding themselves.
They also
No,
can't
that-
lie to
but
each
the
other. 'cause
women
they have a
enjoy
lasso
it.
that forces them
Everyone
to
is
tell the
happy.
truth.
Everyone is happy on Paradise Island. There's not
Yeah,
a cadre of women.
everybody
who
is
are-
happy in the gulag. That's how it always works.
You see, Twitless, this is why I went with the simplest definition of Wonder Woman's politics and not bringing the 30s stuff in, because it gets really weird if you do that.
This is fun. No, I like this. This is fun.
Here's what I find
Um,
is strange about this. Actually, I just
You-
realized.
You heard it first, people. Twitless is enjoying talking about the kink.
I mean, you know, it's part of Wonder Woman. You can't really talk about Wonder Woman without talking about that. It's not even subtle.
It's not even
the
all
create
gone.
the
Like, a lot of
creator
it's still there.
the creator literally was just like, nah, it wasn't sublimated or anything.
He
It's-
literally had a girlfriend who had the same kind of cuffs on her wrists that Wonder Woman had.
it's like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
trans.
So-
It's yeah. Okay,
I'd
so
like
it's
to point out a couple of hilarious comments here that I will not
Yeah.
read, but simply put on the screen.
okay.
Oh no.
The typo was accidental but hilarious. Which one?
I'm not sure.
This one.
But we should definitely talk about Carol Danvers and
I got
Yeah, your
we
brain
should
corrected it
definitely-
first
You
too.
didn't see that first N at first.
Nope,
Yeah,
I
we should-
didn't.
we should,
I saw it now.
But I think we should definitely talk about Carol Danvers and her making a child brigade, turning in people who were disobedient to the state.
Can we not? That's the one I want to go leave off limits because that one just makes me depressed. Leave Miss Marvel alone. Let me
Please,
have the fantasy.
everything
The
about
fantasy
her.
in my head where they did not trash that character beyond.
So we
Rick.
do we
to me,
actually
she
did have a couple
died.
of questions.
in
sorry?
2011 and hasn't been around since.
So we have some questions from chat. Someone said we didn't touch Spider-Man.
Oh,
touch-
actually, I got it. Check this out. Well, I missed this from the chat. Jim Tuner says, so Wonder Woman is a libertine conservative. That is a very accurate description, given her the conservative to her own society.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that would be an interesting way to actually
It's
write the Wonder
contextual,
Woman
though.
character.
It is contextual. Yeah.
Because she's a radical if you put her in our society.
Yeah,
And what
I
she
think
wants to
that's- I
change
think that's-
about it.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
That's a neat way to frame it. I like it.
She was also in the military.
Yeah, but
That's
sort of,
That-
in a very surreptitious. It's a very surreptitious way. It's
that's
not
just
like
an excuse to. That's just an
Yeah.
excuse to put her in close proximity with her bondage buddy. I mean, with
Oh.
Steve Trevor.
gosh.
Fly Fox says Miss Peter Parker, Spider Man.
Yeah, we should do Spider-Man. All right.
Spider Man's good. We also were talking about Daredevil earlier, which that's interesting. But let's look at Peter Parker, Spider Man.
So I gotta admit, I have never really thought of anything political about Spider-Man until we were talking about One More Day recently, and everyone was saying, "Oh yeah, he's totally an atheist," and I was like, "What? Where'd that come from?"
Several storylines where he basically mocks Daredevil for his faith.
Yeah, but I think that's just Peter being a troll.
No, it's not just trolling. It's very
Yeah.
clearly he's the sort of like a skeptic community. I don't believe in God because it's not scientific.
It's certainly something I've never seen, and it's kind of crazy to think that he grew up under Aunt May.
So
I've
if
seen
Peter is a neckbeard, he's definitely a Bernie bro.
Oh yeah. In fact, I think he's one of those believes he's a left libertarian that you don't believe exists.
Oh yeah, that's probably true because he has a very weird relationship with police officers. He respects what they do, but he doesn't think they do it well, and so he stands in their way because
Batman's the same.
I do have to bring up that Peter, in that one storyline where they had the protests, Peter was kind of very neutral. I'm not getting involved. I'm not voting category.
Yeah.
So whatever his personal feelings may be, I actually would put him in the category of does not vote.
I
think we have evidence of that.
Do you feel like perhaps
I don't even think he's that left or libertarian either, but he's definitely in that quadrant.
Yeah. But here's the question: did Peter's time as a billionaire change his views on politics?
Peter was a billionaire?
No. Yeah,
he was.
Very briefly. So here's what happens. I'll tell you, I got to break this down because it drives me crazy. So Peter has spent his entire life doing nothing. He's brilliant potential, has never accomplished anything, never follows through on anything, and still the model loves him. Can you believe it? So anyway, for like a year, he gets ejected from his own body, inhabited by the spirit of Otto Octavius. And Otto Octavius says, wait a second, I'm two geniuses now. He patents a bunch of stuff, becomes wildly famous, gets ejected from Peter's body. Peter wakes up and is like, my God, I'm brilliant.
Wasn't that all very recently?
It like during Dan Slott's run, like
during the Superior
5 to 10 years ago. Superior Spider-Man, yeah. So he's like, wait a second. So Dr. Octopus went back and finished school for me. I've got a master's degree. I've got a PhD. I always knew I could do it. Now I've done it. And he squanders all of his money because he's an idiot.
and then he destroys his company for no real reason.
Yeah.
Honestly,
he finally got guilty about living off somebody else's hard work, I guess.
Honestly, I'm actually for Peter. That actually doesn't. It would bother me, but also doesn't actually bother me that much because Peter's exactly, I think, the kind of guy to make those kinds of mistakes.
Hey, wait a minute. Do we have to take into the Clone Saga and that
no,
Peter isn't actually Peter?
Stop! You're going to derail us forever.
Well, I know some people are going to bring up the Ditko's like objectivism, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't think that actually matters too much because objectivists aren't inherently left or right.
And
I've even seen them move across, honestly.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of that depends on what they base their objectivism on, because objectivism is not a self-sustaining philosophy. It requires subtextual understandings of things, because it's not really objective in the slightest. It's
right.
But moving that aside,
sticking to Spider-Man.
Sticking to Spider-Man. One of the things you have to realize too is that the objectivist concept that was part of Peter's very original stories that where he was kind of looking for evidence, looking for truth, looking for that kind of stuff, kind of went away once Ditko left the book, and it was very much foundational and side to the side of Peter's main journey. So I don't necessarily think that would play much into his political alignment as a 30-something-year-old dude.
Perhaps
who's been living on his aunt's couch for 10 years because he hasn't actually been married or anything. So,
and that's the thing. I was going to say, perhaps the reason I don't think of him as being involved in anything is because between Spider-Man and the tsunami of problems that Marvel likes to hit him with, does he really have time to think about anything political in any way?
No, you're right about that. That's often where they've put him. They put him
he's
in
kind
the
of a
sense that,
doer.
He's too busy to be informed.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's legitimate, and that's one of the things that frustrated me about the whole One More Day thing. On a side note, is that Peter was positioned at a place at that time where he could have actually got his life together and had a happily ever after, because there was somebody to push him further than just being some couch surfing layabout. But couch surfing layabouts are so much fun to read that they had to go ahead and reinstitute that.
No, I just I think he's the type of person that would rather take action anyway, right? So he wouldn't concern himself even to be informed. He'd rather actually just be out there doing. Like, that's the type of person that
here's my thing though.
So he's Batman and doesn't vote.
I agree and disagree with that, Cartoonicus, and I'll tell you why. So
Same.
Spider-Man is too busy to be informed, but he is very easily led by his emotions, especially when it comes to his family. So I also feel like and we've seen this in storylines where he is literally manipulated by Tony Stark to take political positions that he is then not comfortable with and then has to go back and recant. So the fact that I could easily see Spider-Man getting swept up with, we have evidence of this, of Spider-Man getting swept up in an emotional, we have to do this to save the children, and then later on going, oh crap, what mistake have I made with this decision I voted
So Bernie
for?
Bro.
Yeah, he's
Okay.
he was down. So Peter's down there with Occupy Wall Street, and then all of a sudden, what do you mean somebody was raped? What do you mean 6 people were raped? I shouldn't be here anymore. This was bad. I'll find those guys and show them what's up.
Well, I also believe that he probably takes May every single year to vote. Like, he goes with her.
Oh, yeah.
Now, a lot of times
Oh, yeah.
he might just be like not filling out the card or anything, but he definitely takes her every year.
Well, exactly. He has no idea who the names are or what.
Yeah,
what
he
the
fakes
resolutions
it
are.
for his aunt's benefit.
No.
Yeah. Like, he
this
doesn't
goes.
actually fill it out.
Here's how this goes. He takes her to vote, and he does, in fact, intend to vote originally, but then inevitably something big will happen, and Stan Lee will put him in one of those 9 piece scenarios, and by the time he gets back, the polls are already closed.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
And that's been happening for the last 80 years.
No, but I will say again that we have evidence of Spider-Man being led down the garden path emotionally,
Easily.
and that's so he is very susceptible to those types of political movements. That's just who he is. Like, that's not even. I don't even think that point's arguable at this point.
Yeah, so he's a Bernie Bro. Is what Reed said.
Yeah, I think.
Well, so he's always skeptical of people, but also at the same time, he believes that they're trying their best. Like, he's got this weird duality about it.
That is true.
Yeah,
If someone pulls out a save the children argument, he will fall for it.
every single time.
Except when he's saving his own future child.
Oh my gosh!
No, we all feel
you
bad.
broke Reese.
Don't do that again.
You broke Reese. We're done. Okay. Chat. Does chat have anybody? Okay, so there's
All right,
chat.
now I think we can. Yeah.
Chat had a couple. Chat said, Neostar said Omega Girl and the Amazoid Island, and Abigail said Omega Girls politics. I want to do Omega Girls for a second. Because I think that they match up a bit with Superman's.
That isn't unfair because
and also having the creator, you could just tell us what the politics are.
Well,
voice that matters here.
I have to be a little bit in concert because I'm not actually the creator of Omega Girl. I'm just the writer.
Oh, that's right.
So I have to kind of channel a little bit of that. But Omega Girl is very neutral, and she does not like to kind of. She does she's not very overt with her political opinions, except for a couple in terms of, I think she's very pro Law and Order. So she's definitely on that side of things. So very pro Law and Order, very anti-crime, and I'd say pretty, down the middle in a lot of ways. But she'd be very quiet. What we discussed earlier with not telling you who she voted for, not proclaiming political opinions, that's very much in concert with her character.
Translation: I want to sell my comics, and I don't want anybody to get mad at me if I discuss which side of politics she takes.
No, that's just who she is. Like that's consistent with how she's portrayed. She doesn't get too. She keeps that stuff to herself.
Is she one of those both sides are bad?
No. Like I said, she's very pro. Like I said, she is pro Law and Order.
Also,
anti-crime busting. Yeah, so she definitely has.
I couldn't believe Twitless investing himself in a character that says, "Well, both sides are bad." I couldn't see Twitless writing that character.
So, we have Fly Fox Pro asked, "What about Bruce Banner's politics? Not the Hulk, but Bruce."
Oh gosh, you have 2 characters there. Hulk's an anarchist. Okay, I don't think
Hulk even has a political
Hulk's a child.
Hulk as a concept, he's a child. As a concept, he's so selfish.
That's
so
right.
narcissistic
That's an anarchist.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, anarchists.
Well, wait, Hulk or Banner here?
Some anarchists are totally selfish. Some anarchists believe that all governments are so bad that you can't trust any of them.
That's still Hulk. Hulk is all of those things.
No, Hulk doesn't even. Trust doesn't even have a factor.
I disagree with you.
Yeah.
I disagree with you because Hulk specifically hates the U.S. government and military because of how much it hunts him.
Oh, wait a minute. Hulk was actually a monarch for a time on Planet Hulk.
Okay, yeah, but okay. On the thing about
He's got a
him,
point there.
Hulk being hunted is not a matter of a political opinion. It's simply because it's a personal annoyance. It's not a concept about the functioning of government. He just doesn't want to be bugged. It's not the same thing.
Which actually, that's very anarchist.
Hulk would be more like the old man. Get off of my lawn.
Hulk believe in decentralization of government.
Doesn't even the concept that government exists is beyond the Hulk.
Right,
Anyway,
so that's the thing, right? And sometimes he's literally a leader of his own planet. Sometimes
Hulk
he
is a
might
baby.
as well be the equivalent of Banner
all right,
on drugs.
Okay, Bruce Banner.
Planet Hulk
Okay.
is not regular Hulk. Planet
It's
Hulk is full faculties.
I know, but that's what I'm trying to
It's
say.
a different. It's a separate
Hulk-
character.
Hulk
It's
has had
Bruce-
varying levels of intellect,
Yeah,
but
yeah, but
at certain
So here's
times,
the
regular.
question.
We're talking about the regular version.
So
Regular
here's the
version of
question,
Hulk.
though.
that's my
Yeah.
question. Because at certain times, I feel like you could make the argument that Hulk isn't even a person; it's just that it's Banner blacking out. So does that even count? Can you use that as a way of looking at politics?
I think
Or is
both.
Banner just on drugs?
I think
you
both.
know?
I think both Banner and Hulk are anti-military industrial complex.
Oh, yeah, no,
I
they
don't.
hate the
I don't
military.
see how either of them could be pro.
I can see that with Banner, definitely.
Both. If you got a cogent enough Hulk, which we sometimes get, I don't think he's pro military industrial complex. He's anti it at all
Because
points.
yeah, I get that. But
Well,
you have
here's
to
the
be able to
question.
get there first.
Here's
So-
a question, though: is Bruce Banner legally able to vote because of
Being a
his
terrorist?
severe mental his severe mental illness?
well,
Uh,
mental illness is not necessarily a bar from being a vote. However,
But it
he is a
could be.
multiple felon.
Felony, definitely, yeah. He's got felonies everywhere. It's not even just like in one place. It's like across the entire country. He's
Let's say we give him a
multiple-
pardon. Let's say we gave him a pardon because that's happened before. I see.
yeah,
I
he
see
can-
Banner. I see Banner as very anti-establishment.
Yeah.
I don't think I see him as anarchy, although Hulk represents anarchy. I don't see
No,
Banner.
Hulk represents chaos.
We're kind of
Anarchy
splitting
isn't
hairs
just
there.
no
I think
government.
we're splitting hairs there, but
We're not.
but no, but
okay.
but here's an interesting point because Banner sometimes hates Hulk. So would Banner actually be more on the side of order?
The other
just
thing
because
is
of that.
because here's where probably the next 10 or 20 years you're going to be affected by this because of the MCU. Professor Hulk is becoming way more canonized than it used to. We might even begin to see that again in the comics and have this very intellectual version of Hulk who can think just like Banner, and he
Yeah,
is.
but
in
it-
fact,
That's the
You're
version
just
you
gonna
get in
have the
Planet
same
of-
as Banner.
That's the
No.
yeah.
They,
you just
Right.
they also did that in the Immortal Hulk, where Hulk decided to become a political terrorist again.
Anyway, so Bruce Banner's politics. I think that I think it's pretty clear that Hulk, as written back in the day, is somebody who's gone through some political change because he worked on the Gamma Bomb project as one of those guys, and then suffers the consequence of the being pushed too hard, the bomb going off, him being changed, him being chased, living on the run. So I think that Banner is a guy who has come to dislike the government for its corruption. So I definitely see him being somebody who's got a lot of issues with that, but coming from a place of burnt, a kicked dog, more than somebody who has a principled objection to government in its formal forms.
Yeah,
I
because he
buy
seems
that.
like he'd be a pro-union type of guy.
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, I think he would be pro-union, but at the same time, unions aren't there for Banner either.
Okay,
They're all
yeah,
part
yeah.
of the system that
Right,
chases him down. So
I
here's
agree
the
that
thing.
Banner's politics are probably more influenced by his emotional experiences than his principles in many cases. I buy that's kind of part of the point I was trying to get at. I think so. I agree with that a lot. I think he's very anti-establishment, even if you could say, well, that doesn't quite make sense if you actually follow that to its logical conclusion. But honestly, I think that we have versions of Banner that would be abolish the police kind of things, like these kinds of political statements that you're like, that doesn't make a lick of sense. And it's like, yeah, but I'm expressing it because of how much anger and rage I have against the system because of how much injustice has been done to me.
Well,
I want to
and
take it apart. I could see
Well,
Banner
is that
signing
the
up for
deal,
some of
right?
that.
Is that not always the point of Hulk? Is that there are two people, and that he should be a conflicted character where one of them thinks one thing and one of them thinks another.
Sort of, but but both of them have been so hunted by the government that.
And that actually brings up an interesting question that Abigail asked at the beginning of the show: are there any ACAB heroes? And yeah, probably the Hulk. The Hulk's.
I mean, there are quite a few ACAB heroes in general.
I mean, I think Frank would feel that way a lot of the times.
Yeah. I don't know that I don't know if you think they're bastards so much as that they're just feckless. As far as the Punisher goes, but I think the Hulk has no love for anyone in a uniform.
You see, here's the thing about Banner, right?
Yeah,
Sometimes
the FedEx guy better watch it. I'm saying
this is where it gets interesting to me, because sometimes you have that Professor Hulk mentality where the two are just merged into one, and it's basically Banner in green. And then on the exact opposite times, there have been times when he is out that he hates the Hulk so much. He is out hiding in the desert or in the jungles.
So it doesn't matter if he hates the Hulk. He still hates the government because it doesn't matter.
My point is, he has thrown away society entirely, and he's going to hide out here completely alone as a way of not having to deal with anybody.
I mean, realistically,
that doesn't change his opinions on the things we've talked about, though. He's still whether or not he lives on the side of a mountain, he's still like, screw the government.
Hermits still have their opinions.
That's true.
He's not going full Uncle Ted.
Just ask Reese.
Hey, I live in a community. Yep.
What's the name? It's like. Oh gosh, that's funny.
Oh gosh. Anyway, my point is simply that there is a point, and there have been, where society is not of interest to him because he wants to get as far away from society as possible.
Yes.
So we did see one in chat. I do want to go back and address because it's my favorite comic book character, and I think it might have been acted as a bit of a joke, but I actually do want to give a somewhat thoughtful answer. Dr. Doom, and I'm going to say a technocratic monarchist. I think it is not just monarchy, although it's monarchy in style. He definitely apes a lot of the sort of medieval monarchy in style. I think that in terms of practice, it's this technocratic, utopian kind of dictatorial situation that's got a lot of the trappings of monarchy attached. Doom believes in utopia.
Oh yeah, I think he's definitely Hegelian,
right?
For sure.
Most of a lot of Doom's plans are the fact that he arrogates himself to being, I am the only person who can lead mankind to utopia.
There was a I don't remember the context of the comic one where he confronted the Panther God. And they said, "Oh, Panther God will destroy you." And Doom's like, "No, they won't." And Doom said, "I'm the only person who can save humanity. Give me the vibranium." The Panther God had to accept Doom's logic.
Yeah. So, one thing, go ahead and talk about here. The term technocratic, can, depending on context, can usually mean two things. One is the idea that it's ruled by technology or aided by technology. Allows an autocrat to rule effectively. That's actually what Woodrow Wilson, one of the reasons Woodrow Wilson wanted to rewrite the Constitution, the son of a bitch. The other idea of technocrat is rule by the experts. Another favorite concept of Wilson's.
Both of those sound like Dr. Doom. So yeah. both of them are perfectly in line with him.
Yeah. I mean, he would even use magic if he needed to, but it's still the fact that he's the expert, and that's what matters.
Yeah.
Although I think most of his utopian things are either
pretty much all technology.
It's technology, or it's cosmic energy, which is just science applied.
Well, and the magic he uses is usually for knowing things rather than making things.
Yeah.
Because the energy, the cost.
So here's the thing.
He doesn't usually use magic as like to bring about the utopia so
Right.
much.
It's to learn things you can't know
So-
otherwise. Yeah.
Here's the thing.
Forget
So that
Excalibur.
makes him a Gnostic Hegelian.
Yes.
There are exceptions, but it's often easier with villains because unless you want to make them a really sympathetic villain, you already know you're going in about to vilify everything they stand for.
I think it depends.
No.
No, I think
They
that-
could just
I
be
think that
wrong.
depends.
They could be a good-hearted person who's just
Well, I mean,
wrong and still be a
that's-
Again,
villain.
that's going to happen at times, but how often is that going to happen versus
It happens
look,
plenty.
it's a
No,
villain.
no,
It
there are
happens
too
a
many. I
lot.
think there are too many exceptions for that to be a good rule.
Well, I mean, and
there's a
like,
bunch
I
of
would say even
Batman.
characters like Electro are, who have like all the problems and you want to feel bad for them at the same time, you're like, yes, but you're an idiot and you're absolutely wrong in every single way, right?
No, there's too many. There's too many Batman characters, I think, that are basically misguided, and who essentially have an opinion, or even their stance on an issue is solid. Like Catwoman, Poison Ivy, and so on, often will take a hardline stance on an ecological issue, especially one that pertains to like either
Cats
plant
or
plant
plants.
or animal life. And they'll do something wrong, and Batman, because he represents law and order, will have to bring them in. But there's usually a sort of understanding in those stories that, well,
Yeah.
the real villain here is the one who is murdering the cats or destroying the
Yes,
rainforest.
but at the same
So-
time, see, there's a difference between.
So the worldview's not being vilified. It's just it is the tactics being vilified.
Right,
essentially.
and that's what I'm
Plus,
saying. though.
you can be
It's a lot harder
a
to
villain
actually
and do
get one of
good
those-
things
right.
Lex.
as
And
well. Like Lex Luthor is
Right,
a horrible
Lex-
person, and he does good things for all the wrong reasons.
Lex,
Well,
I
we-
think,
we
is a
got-
great example of one of those exceptions where you can actually find yourself asking the question, who actually is wrong here?
Yeah. Well,
But
it's
so
not
often,
exactly
if the character is just willing to murder, 10,000 people at once to get what they want, it's very hard to say, well, like,
Speaking of which,
they're
actually,
not all that bad.
here's a fun one to actually discuss. We talked about Superman. What is Lex's political stances? And so
He
on?
votes
He's-
for himself.
yeah, all the time.
I mean,
writes in
Lex
every time.
is another technocrat.
100%. And
Here's
but-
the thing: when he's run for president, I believe, I'm not saying I agree with this, but I would think that many of the writers would portray him as running on the Republican ticket.
Yes,
They would
but
really
that's not
said-
exclusive with being a technocrat.
No. I'm just saying that, like, I just it's fleshing that out. I think
Yeah,
they
so-
probably try to
so
paint him.
I
Yeah,
think-
but he's like
I
a New
think
York Republican.
I think, yeah, Lex. Okay, actually, hang on, guys.
Trump publican.
Yeah, pretty much. Like he'd probably
So
be
here's-
a very
I-
similar camp.
Hang on. I got to show you guys a thing here.
Okay.
Just
Once again, while you're doing that, I am going to say, once again, Lex, there's two different versions of Lex. One I love and one I hate. The one I hate usually has hair, and he is portrayed as pure evil and selfish, and usually has this, like, snarky attitude about him, like he's some version of Tony Stark. The other is usually bald and super serious, and he believes with all his might that it is his duty to save mankind. And he's the guy who, like, if
that's
he's not
certainly what
murdering
Lex
people,
does.
he'll have a conversation with Superman, and I'll be like, okay, but the thing is, I'm in agreement with Lex over here.
There's a third version of Lex, and
Is there?
the version is that he has some principles, but the principles are trumped by his greed, and that's the version that you
I don't know
get
this
in
version.
the. That's the version in the animated series. He
Yeah,
has
you also
some.
get that a lot actually. There's been in a lot of comics too.
Yeah, he has That's the original. That's the original pitch for Lex. Back in the '60s, when Lex went and saved a planet. And did these very altruistic things,
and
but
it
at the end of the
wasn't
day,
even-
he could not overcome his own, hubris and foibles.
Well,
Those-
not
those
before he
dumb-
was
those
God,
good.
but he's not one. That's the
Well, and it's not
problem.
even greed so much, right? Because like
Some-
the impetus for his hatred, because it was hatred. He was out to foil Superman because he and
Superman
Superboy were
ruined his
bros
hair.
back in the day, and Superboy was looking over Lex's big machine, and he says, "Hey, listen, you forgot to carry a one." And Lex says, "Don't tell me what to do." Fires the machine, loses all of his hair, and he blames Superboy for it for the next 20 years. So, so
Sure.
it was actually it was hubris, exactly, but it was also like this bitterness and this anger over being wrong once.
I think a lot of spite drives Lex Luthor.
There's a lot
Even
of
to do the right thing. There's a lot of spite in him.
Well,
greed's
right,
in,
but- and
greed's
that's
in
the
there too.
thing.
Oh yeah, there's
really
definitely
think-
greed, but I think there's a lot
I
of
think
spite.
the greed's secondary to being the right one.
Okay, that's fair.
Right, and
Really
I
wants to
think
do
that's
the
the
right
thing
thing. I'll buy
about the version I like is that he's usually against Superman because he's so ticked off with the antics he sees in him. Which again, I'll be like, yeah, you're kind of right in that half the time.
So the day after the election in 2016, I made this.
Oh no!
It's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Mm.
I mean, you're not
Land.
wrong.
Specifically, this version of Lex Luthor.
Right, yeah, the real
I
estate
love that
version.
version.
Very
Oh, but
specifically
see-
this one.
Yeah, but see the thing that again, that's the guy with hair. That's the guy with an attitude. I do not like this version. He decides. I think I'm gonna just nuke.
I mean, to be fair, it
LA,
was a
but
wig.
I
He
can
takes the
make
hair
money.
off at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
I know, but the point is, it's like he's not. He has
It's
no standards whatsoever, right? He just decides.
It's a land grab.
Exactly.
Very specifically, it's a.
I know. You're saying he's but again, as far as being a villain, he is 100% selfish in this version.
Yeah.
I do
And,
not like that version of Lex. I like.
And
I
the
that-
I
Donner
like the anime.
Supermans-
I like the animated version that we get. The one that was like in the Justice League cartoon, where he has some principles, he'll do some things that I think that he believes in, but he is largely motivated by his own ego and his greed, and so those.
Oh
things
yeah, like he'll
trump.
do
So
good
he ends
things if it makes him look
Exactly.
better to
Yeah.
people as
So
well.
it,
I like
like,
Smallville.
I like the anime version. I think walks the line and shows him having good moments here and there, even admirable moments, but then also showing how much they're dragged down by the evil in his life.
You need to enunciate when you say animated because I keep trying to wonder what kind of anime version there is of Lex Luthor.
Oh, gosh,
Um,
animated.
but also, interestingly enough, when you bring up the Richard Donner Superman, that was based off of 1970s and 80s New York. So Donald Trump and his totally legitimate hair was a thing back then.
Yeah.
Well,
I agree.
Well,
and-
it wouldn't be
and
the
that was
last
part of-
time, of course,
that
that
was-
he's been compared to him.
Well, and Lex Luthor's reimagining in the After the Crisis was very intentionally designed after Donald Trump as well. The idea that he was a real estate mogul who'd come up from Donald Trump's dad, come up from nothing, and that whole piece.
A loan of $1 million.
I don't know if you noticed. They, had
Small
the-
loan, my small
they-
business loan of $1 million.
they got their jab in there in Young Justice season 3.
Anyway, so chat. Okay, do we want to link chat and let them?
Yeah. Let me see if I
Let
still
them
got
hop
this.
in.
Remember, Daredevil was asked before, which being a
yeah.
defense attorney and a Catholic, I think he is a bleeding heart liberal of New York.
Yeah.
Chicago.
Daredevil is
Um,
one of
We're gonna go
Daredevil
with
is one of those
Chicago on
that
that one.
Daredevil's one of those that I question, because he's also he's Catholic, but he's kind of lapsed Catholic, but which
Yeah.
would probably make him more likely to be a Democrat. But I also wonder how much Daredevil
Not nowadays.
even believes in the system enough to vote. You know what I'm saying? Because
well,
I mean,
he's
like
a lawyer, so we know he's corrupt.
Oh.
well, he's supposed to be the only non-corrupt lawyer in New York, so.
You mean
I don't know
the
why I was-
guy who
I was saying
literally
Chicago
goes out
because-
to take the
because
law
Hell's
into his own
Kitchen-
hands?
I said Chicago because Hell's Kitchen always reminds me of New York. The way it's portrayed, it's got.
I mean,
Um,
Hell's Kitchen is New York.
but you know, I know it's.
No, the
yeah.
way specifically that they portray Hell's Kitchen and Daredevil, it feels more like we're taking a piece of Chicago and putting it in here. Even though Hell's Kitchen is pretty dirty. Like
Also, this is
It's not
another
that far
character who was probably affected by Miller. Not sure how much in this case, but
a bit.
hey, we got Star Storyteller.
Yeah,
Fly
yeah,
Fox
yeah.
says Justice League Unlimited Amazo episode is good. It is. I think that's we're talking about the follow-up one where Amazo comes in and Lex Luthor saves the
Right.
world, right? That's a great one. Yeah. that's
Luthor?
fantastic.
oh, that's right, because he's going after him. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one complex episode.
It's one of my favorites. It's one of the best ones.
Had everybody in it.
But it's one
Do
of
we
the
wanna
that show is
pull Star
fantastic.
in?
If you're
Oh,
not,
she's sitting in the chat. Oh, jeepers.
hey,
But hang on,
Oh, I pulled her and you dropped her out.
hit the wrong
Hello,
button.
how's
Hello.
everybody.
hey, how's it going?
It's going well, going well. Long time no see here on the
I
show.
see my avatar is absolutely on point for today with Usagi and the Constitution.
Oh, that's great.
I did not know what she was holding.
Wouldn't that be a Japanese constitution?
Yes, it would be, but who cares?
I mean,
She
we
looks
wrote their
more-
constitution for them, so.
So what do you
Well,
think? Is there a superhero that you would like to tell us, or do you want to tell us how we're wrong, or what's your take on the politics of superheroes? Is something we missed?
I just came on, so I'm kind of coming in hot and blind.
Oh.
So
Okay.
I think we've covered all the big names so far, other than Thor.
We didn't,
Well,
we didn't cover Spawn. What is
We didn't
Spawn's
cover
political
Spawn.
take?
What?
Okay.
I mean,
Thor,
We didn't
actually,
cover,
I could.
somebody mentioned.
Okay. I have
Oh,
a
is it
very,
somebody
very
mentioned
limited thing of Thor, but wouldn't he believe in an absolute monarchy?
A
Part of the
Viking.
absolute monarchy.
So, yeah, Thor believes in
the
a
thing about-
Viking-styled monarchy. It's not because he's pure Viking mythology.
Yeah.
It's not the traditional, medieval ones. It's this very warrior-centric culture situation, and I think that's
So like
consistent with
Wakanda,
how.
where you is it a trial by combat kind of dealio?
Sort of. I mean, so in Beowulf, which is kind of the sort of what we understand about the template of it, right? Beowulf becomes the king because of his history of hunting monsters, of defeating warriors, of going on quests, and he comes back and to Norway, and they make him the king of his little part of the kingdom, and he serves there unquestioned until he's an old man. Right,
Monarchy by meritocracy.
Monarchy by meritocracy. So
That's what I was going to say.
And so the thing is, so at the end, no one will question him because he's powerful and wise. So even when he's old and frail, no one's going to stand up against Beowulf. But
he still fought a dragon when he was old.
But I was getting to that.
So I don't think that ended very well for him, though.
Well, no, that's part of it. That's part of the cycle.
Especially the hot Angelina Jolie dragon.
Oh gosh, no! Why?
Why did you mention that? So, this actually, and that movie doesn't go into the last part of it. So, old Beowulf, he's ossified, but he's untouchable because of his merit, right? And so, the only thing that can take him off his throne is combat. So when they awaken the dragon, of course, he's the first one, the most powerful, mighty warrior to go up there. But he needs to die killing the dragon because he needs to make way for the next generation of warriors. Because
that's the mythopoeic interpretation. Politically, I'm more along. I think we were onto something with monarchy by meritocracy.
Right.
There's a caveat here, and that is that Thor is specifically fascinated with Jane Foster and subsequently humanity and its ways. Well, so this might be a very conflicted character, I think.
Well, and that's actually part of when you look at the original interpretation of Thor, right? So Thor's ego and his pride harms the kingdom. So he's actually sent to Earth and wiped of his memory and wiped of his powers, and he becomes Donald Blake, the crippled doctor. And so he learns service through medicine, and his he discovers the hammer of Thor, but he can't be Thor all the time. So when he becomes Donald Blake again and returns to being this humble cripple servant, his Mjolnir transforms into his walking stick. And so the sword, that's how it originally was. Right. So the source of his strength is also his crutch and his weakness, and a symbol of his weakness. And so you have those two character interplays that happened until he became fully
they didn't keep that. That was them playing.
That was before
kind of a gimmick.
Yeah, and it was. I thought it was a beautiful gimmick. I think it really plays into the concept of it.
That would actually be really interesting if you had a character that was weak throughout the whole thing, because we saw that a little bit, because I've mostly interacted with the Marvel universe in film. It'd be kind of interesting to have a character that would go back to being weak and going back and forth. It would be kind of an interesting play, because then you'd actually See, this is the thing I get pissed off about, is that often if you look really carefully at the lore, you'll get like ideas that woke twits would actually use and probably do well if they actually look at the lore. Because then you could expose, like, you could explore like disability, how does that work being a hero, and see a lot of that. But do they do the work and actually do the lore research? No, they don't. Oh my gosh, it's like,
because if you do that, then
okay. Can I say this about Lord of the Rings? I'm sorry, I'm gonna go off on a tangent, but this is the thing.
Ooh, careful, you might hurt Twitless here.
Okay, Twitless, this is all I'm gonna say. They really wanted to do Game of Thrones, but they never could get the rights for it. And
you're not talking about Lord of the Rings.
He's not,
Lord of the Rings, the Amazon
talking
show.
about
She's talking about Rings of Power.
Yeah.
The Rings of Power. If they were smart and actually did their thing, instead of trying to get all of Lord of the Rings, they could have got one little story, a humble little story. Oh gosh, I'm blanking on it. The tale of oh gosh, I hate this. It's about the dragon. It had a dragon and everything. It actually had a dragon. It had canonical nudity, and it had a tragic tale, and it was all wrapped up perfectly. You could have done a whole different, mature, totally different thing, and incest, and it had all the Game of Thrones ideas, except as usual, Trump did it better than James R.R. Martin. He even stole his R.R. Just like, I'm sorry. I'm laughing.
To bring it back to superheroes in politics.
Yes.
Is there a particular superhero that that we haven't addressed, chat?
On the subject of monarchy, somebody in the chat was talking about Namor earlier, and I think Namor is interesting because Namor throughout his career has been a man of two worlds, right?
Yeah.
So within the realm of the sea, in the golden city of Atlantis, right? It would be a monarchy, and he is the heir to the kingdom or the king later on, right? And so it's a typical feudalistic monarchy. But when he's not blowing up New York or drowning New York, when he's living amongst humans, he's participating in human society, right? Not as a king, but as because he's technically an American citizen.
Joe Blow, man, I wish he would drown DC on occasion.
Anyway,
specific locations in Minecraft. In Minecraft, don't get weird.
So anyway, point being, with that, what do you guys think? How Namor would interact with what we've seen of him interact with the surface world, living amongst us as a citizen?
First of all, shall we assume that anything we say about Namor can automatically be applied to Aquaman as well?
No.
They have very different upbringings.
Aquaman is a very traditional kind of monarchist.
You sound bored, man.
No, I'm just Namor. Let me think. See, Namor borders.
Thing, right? He's got this.
No. Namor is far more tempestuous, violent, and much more willing
There's a huge difference between Namor and Aquaman.
He doesn't put up with hoes.
Well, I'll tell you one of the big differences is that Aquaman was raised with a father and Namor wasn't.
Oh, gosh.
Uh-oh.
Namor.
That explains everything.
Namor is Namor is very pro-war, I have to say, because he's literally declared war on Wakanda essentially before.
He's kind of an imperialist in a way.
Yeah.
He's very much of an imperialist. I would agree.
As one should be, if you are a monarch on occasion.
So,
or just in general.
He is definitely an elitist, and I would say he is, unfortunately, I think, a bit of a specious elitist, because now that he's a mutant, he basically sees himself and there's like a racial supremacy kind of thing tinge to it as well.
Well, and there always really was too, because like that was part of his whole deal with being Atlantean and not fitting in. He would always push forward his Atlantean identity to hold it over other humans.
And none of this is Aquaman. So like I said, so yeah, like he's Namor's an interesting guy.
Yeah, but he isn't always hostile to America. I mean, like for like the entire stretch of the not the entire, about half of the stretch of the John Byrne run in the 90s, he was living in America, right? Mm-hmm. As an American citizen, owning companies, being the business.
That was when he was exiled, right? Wasn't that?
Yeah. Well, part he was part of it. He was exiled during that thing. He also gets his throne back, but he sets up a regent for a time because he has things to do on the surface and all that kind of stuff.
He has things to do. He has Sue Richards to.
No. Things with him and Sue were at a very bad place there.
Everyone knows that's the big joke.
Neostar
basically, he was stealing someone's wife, right? At the point.
Yeah. Back in the 60s, that was the thing. Before they were married, there was this attraction between Namor and Sue was engaged but not married yet, and a couple
free range.
Yeah, that whole thing. So,
hate the player, not the game.
We still play.
Don't hate the
now.
Sue Sue dug Namor personally, like as friends, and kept like that line of communication open even after things went on, and there was like kind of the courtly love thing, but kind of not. And so.
Well, Namor lives in America because, like all elitists and all over the world, doesn't matter if they're from China, Russia, everywhere else, they all decide they want to live in America. So very on brand.
Well, part of it is as an elitist and as a businessman at this point, and he was exiled from Atlantis during the first part of the run. And he is a U.S. citizen, so he could come here without having any big problems because his dad was a U.S. merchant marine sailor. So
pretty sure he can't vote though, so we don't have to deal with him voting on stuff.
Yeah, I don't think. I think if you send a tidal wave to around New York City, they keep you from voting for.
I was just gonna say the fact that I don't think you can rule a country and then also vote in U.S. elections.
Oh no, that's true too. That's true too. He's a
well,
citizen.
Here's the thing.
He can't hold
He has the ultimate veto vote at that point. Like, we're not going to let this person come, and it's like, well, guess what? There's a tidal wave. I'm sorry. I'm in a mood today.
That's fine. I would think as political leaning that he would also favor other people who are strong-arm politicians, right? He would respect power being wielded on behalf of whatever the rule of the government is for the best interest of the citizens, even if they don't agree with the best interest.
Very pro-mutant lobby. That's one thing we didn't touch on, was essentially the mutant lobby. The whole thing to discuss, like Magneto and Professor X.
Well, and I think I think that he would also, looking at American politics, I think Namor would have a specific interest in certain foreign affairs, right? Maintaining foreign affairs between Atlantis and America would be a high priority, and so I think he would lobby for politicians who would hold that in there, because he does have split. Even Namor, mature Namor, not kid Namor back in the day, but mature Namor who's 80 years old and not crazy, because at the time it was like that. He would still have a split loyalty between America and Atlantis, leaning toward Atlantis, always leaning toward Atlantis. So,
well, like I said, nowadays there is a racial component.
Yeah,
there's a dual racial component. Yeah. He is a racial supremacist, I'm pretty sure.
You could say maybe a racial realist, I suppose.
No, he's a supremacist. He's definitely like, I'm superior to you. There's no doubt about that.
Well, he thinks he's superior to most people. Well, and that's actually one of the really fun things in a lot of Namor stories, is that Namor believes, because of his strength in battle, because of his royal bloodline, because of his uncanny abilities, because he could fly, he came to believe. First, he was trying to prove that he was worthy, but he even came to believe that he was superior to all of his people, as well as anybody on the surface. He's just the best person to ever be on Earth.
Abigail says, "What are the politics of Namor?"
Namor.
Namor, isn't that a respelling of the Raven?
Rona,
Namor.
actually.
Quote the Raven. Namor.
So, but but what I was getting at was that one of the fun things in a lot of the Silver Age comics is that there is an Atlantean woman who is part of the coterie, part of the noble class, called Dorma, who would routinely call Namor out for his nonsense, and they had a really fun dynamic back in a lot of the Silver Age comics.
So did Doom and Namor; those were fun.
Oh yeah, because Doom and Namor essentially have very similar views of things.
No, there's just all the team up comics where they team up, betray each other, and then get back together again. Like
remind me why this guy
it was like a bad dating relationship. It was really funny.
They have similar but opposing views on things.
Yeah, I think that's true. Well, and like you're talking about Doom as a technocrat, right? So he believes in rule by effectiveness, right? But his Namor believes in rule by right and power.
Yeah, by decree,
by
God.
Decree, right? I mean, Imperius Rex, right? That whole idea of that the Emperor's like law, right? The Emperor's rule. That he simply has the right, and his strength and power is a manifesting of a divine right to be, king. So anything Namor decides is obviously correct because his war cry is his license.
So, question then: is there any superheroes who actually do run from the whole? I know in like ancient China, they had this concept of the mandate of heaven, which is where they believed that it would rest on an emperor when he was doing what he was supposed to be doing, but it could be revoked, like when there was a bunch of
it's part of the
crap
dynastic
went bad.
Yeah, it's part of the dynastic cycle. And so it was inevitable for those things to happen, and then a new mandate of heaven would be established. So you're asking if there is a character who represents that,
very, very honestly, it's the
country or
cycle of the
anything.
Iron Fist.
Well, does it count when Thor literally has his powers stripped from him because he's not doing a good job?
That could be a possibility. Or does Wakanda have, or is that only a I never watched it, so I don't know. Does Wakanda have a trial by combat?
Yeah, they're trial by combat, but I think that's less mandate of heaven, but more just like
there's they do have a mandate of heaven because the person who wins is the agent. It's not the word, but the agent of the cat deity.
Panther God, right?
Yeah, the Panther God. So
okay.
So that's
kind of like so a biblical parallel, because a lot of us come from that, would be like casting lots almost. The trial by combat is almost a casting of the lot to prove who is
worthy
to rule.
I would say casting of the lots is the one that I think you don't see much in American superheroes because it's all chance, and superheroes like to, even the supervillains, there usually needs to be more than just random chance to establish your worldview.
Right. And a lot of the idea though is that the lots are destined, fated. And so then you'd have things that would fall into that category, like Hal getting the ring, Barry being struck by lightning. These things are they're being chosen by the forces of the universe to be there for that,
which is the author, of course.
I mean, you could get into casting lots kind of sort of when you're talking about the mutants, because a lot of it's not fated. It's actually literally just genetic mutation. Some of them have better ones than not. So obviously you have to have like a useful mutation to be a hero, but some people manage to make things work, kind of like how quirks are in My Hero.
What is the Tick's politics? Spoon is the answer to that.
No.
Yes.
Well, it comes from the Latin poly, meaning
no. There's a comic where somebody said, where Arthur said, "Tick, they're from the government." It's like, well, we definitely don't need the government here. So Tick does have politics, and it's anarchist to some degree.
Yeah, absolutely. Tick 100% believes that the individual has the right to act on behalf of justice. So that's pretty solid throughout every interpretation of the Tick. he's an anarchist in the philosophic sense, not in the way that there shouldn't be a government, but that the people have the right to act on behalf of the government with or without the government's consent. So
Yeah.
But he does believe in the good nation of America. He just thinks that the individuals are the ones that keep it up.
Yes.
Well, is he wrong though?
Well, he is insane, so.
Same people say
All
right
right.
things sometimes.
You brought up the Tick and Omega Girl. I'm going to have to throw this one in here. In fact, I've got the perfect thing up already. Captain Stupendous. Let's talk about it. Shall we?
Why don't you start? You brought it up.
Yeah.
Oh, Captain Stupendous. Considering he literally became president in the current chapter. Gosh, I hate this. I feel like Captain Stupendous doesn't actually know what politics is. He is 100% about himself. And he just sees this as a means of, boosting that same ego, being the hero he believes he's supposed to be. Which basically just means power. So he'd probably see any form of
I gotta head
office
out. See you later.
Okay.
As regardless of what the law is, he'd probably just immediately get in office and see it as his "I can do whatever I want" card.
Power politics.
Yes.
So that's hilarious. Abigail asked, "What are Chad's politics?" That kind of depends on what point of life we're dealing with him. In the beginning of his high school years, Chad is essentially apolitical. He believes he doesn't take the time to think about, when we first meet him, doesn't take time to think about what is right or just or anything. He just does what he wants, and he usually gets what he wants. And as he moves along, he starts learning mercy and heroism and all that kind of stuff. And so by the time, if any of you guys have read Joe Jobs, at the end of that, he makes a cameo appearance. At that point, he actually is works for the government, but has very great reservations about centralized governance. And that's all I'm going to tell you on that one. So,
all right. Well, I think that we've covered a good amount today, and we might even be able to do a follow-up on this. This is a fun conversation, everybody. So thank you for participating. We had a lot of good conversation in chat. So thank you very much for joining us with that and giving us your for being you. Thank you, chat, for being you. You did a great job.
Yes, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate you guys tuning in and asking us all sorts of questions. So
Please
yeah,
don't cancel us.
So yeah. Oh, also, side note, Fly Fox asked what Peter the Problematic Person's politics. That's his webcomic. You should go check it out on Webtoon. It's great.
I mean, he would know.
I was going to say, you were the one who
maybe he wouldn't. I don't know.
But I think he's just teasing because he says he's about to upload 6 pages. So,
nice.
Oh, okay.
Letting people know that more's coming. I think that was his segue.
Gotcha.
I mean, you could definitely make the argument that a writer doesn't actually know the politics. Like they'd be like, I don't know, I just write the character, and they would just leave it up to you to figure it out.
Yeah, I do think that there's something to said for that. I mean, like especially when you think about
Eric Larson's. You know what we didn't cover? Because Eric Larson's Savage Dragon, because we know his politics, because he bloody endorses people on the bloody front cover.
Well, and it doesn't even make sense anyway. I don't want to talk about Savage Dragon right now. I'm tired.
But I'm just saying we know the politics in as much as we know who he votes for, because
well, we know who Larson votes for. Savage Dragon is a whole different ball of wax.
He endorses on the page. He endorsed
right.
Biden.
I mean, yeah.
Like Savage Dragon, I endorse this person.
I know, but like those characters don't exist in the world of Savage Dragon because it's in the future after the U.S. government has largely collapsed. So it doesn't even make sense for him to be endorsing anybody. So it's just fan art.
Must resist bringing up Gene Yang.
Huh? I mean, Gene Yang's politics are pretty obvious too. But
yeah,
we've discussed those to death.
Yes.
Okay.
We have.
And back again.
That was Savage Dragon's son. That's also true.
Okay. All
but they also live in the future.
Well,
so
I didn't Savage Dragon endorse like Hillary, and that was not.
Yeah, there's been a bunch. Every
Okay.
I mean,
he's
Larson
done it.
votes straight ticket Democrat.
You know, at some point we need to discuss when Savage Dragon became a porn comic.
No, we don't need to talk about that.
In fact, we could
actually
we'd have to look into it, and I don't want to. I just
Crap, we forgot to talk about Deadpool.
Also, no, Faith. Sorry, I do have to bring this up. Faith from Valiant, because we've just been doing the big two. Faith from Valiant, I believe, supports Hillary Clinton because they did the whole Faith meets Hillary Clinton story.
Do we need to do a part 2 of this?
Probably.
No, maybe.
I think we because we bring in the Valiant. We got to give love to our movies.
You just got to space it out.
The part of the problem is yeah, they definitely should space it out.
What politics are being Chinese?
Oh, that's going with the status quo.
I was going to say, actually, there's a discussion we could have about that, but we don't have another 2 hours.
Yeah,
I have to bring up the Tao Te Ching and a whole bunch of different things.
What I was gonna say is that in order to really like get some of those lower like abstract characters, we'd all have to do a bunch of reading to look for context clues of whoever we'd want to hit. Because it's not
for some of them, like I said, I was just pulling off the top of my head where it's like, here's a character endorsing a political candidate. We don't have to imagine it.
Well, I mean, like Faith happens in current year, so that would make sense on a big part of that. I started reading My Sister Suprema. I've not finished it. It is hilarious. Chuck Dixon's webcomic over on the Arctoons thing. Absolutely funny stuff. I've only read like the first 6 chapters though, or 6 updates. So
yeah, I want to flesh out the politics of Exo Manowar. That'll be a fun one.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we'll maybe come up with a list of like 4 guys and get into Exo Manowar. Would be fascinating actually, because that's a fun concept. Although you'd have to talk about which one, because there's like 3 canons. Although he's pretty consistent across a couple of them from what I've read. So his character.
Yeah, it's just the reboot they did. They cheapened it by taking away the thing that actually made him interesting, which was him not understanding things. Mm-hmm. So it was taking a caveman and or practically a Neanderthal and putting him inside Iron Man's suit. And so he had to come up with new vocabulary to describe things he didn't understand. And half the fun of reading the book was essentially reading, like, how is he going to interpret what a laser is? How does he interpret? What does he come up with to just understand things? And he's like, firelight for laser. And in the modern version, in like 2 panels, they're just like, you understand everything now. The suit just downloads all the knowledge into your head. And I was like, really? It's terrible. It's stupid.
It's stupid.
Yes.
Forget about it.
Anyway, everybody read the panels comics. Read Forces of Good and Evil. Read Super Schooled. Read Omega Girl, and read X Dynamis Chaos from the Metal. And keep your eyes peeled for what Larry's got coming down the pike. Did I miss anybody?
I don't think so. Oh, you can check out Peter the Problematic Person on Webtoon, and if you have trouble looking it up because their search is a little hinky, you can go to idealcomics.net and you can hit the drop down for comics and read and get the link off of there.
I just subscribed. It was actually pretty easy to find them.
Sweet.
Of course, actually, I didn't even go to Webtoons. I just Googled it.
Sweet. Oh, cool. All
right. I think that's the show.
Post all the links.
Do we know what we're doing next week? Did we figure that out, or we just...
I thought we did, but I don't remember. So maybe I'll look after we end the show.
Right.
That's it. That's the show. Good night, everybody. And until next time, go out there and read some comics. Jeez, what are you doing? Come on. God.
Peace out.